You like to cook? You'll be a chef. Interested in education? You'll probably become a teacher. I wanted to fly, so I became a pilot. I eventually got my pilot's license with multiple ratings and then got a job with the Air National Guard. Unfortunately, none of the major airlines were hiring when my time was up, so I've been with a small regional airline for about 2 years now. Throughout all of my trials and tribulations, the one constant in my life has been Amy, my wife. My beloved Amy came from a single-parent family of drunkard parents. Amy was probably the only kid in school who was poorer than me. Amy was a freckled girl with a nose too big for her face and jug ears that she tried to cover up with her long, light brown hair. We met in third grade and never parted after that. It was us, two kids from the wrong side against everyone else. I remember the day in junior high when I told Amy I was going to be a pilot and fly. Amy didn't bat an eye. Kevin, if you're going to fly airplanes, promise to take me with you. And I did. And we got married the first chance we got. My height never exceeded 5 feet 6 inches, but Amy grew to almost 6 feet. She was a slender girl with almost no hips. She still had freckles and never grew a nose or ears, but to me, Amy was the most beautiful bride in the world. That didn't change after our wedding at the courthouse. Amy followed me from bases in Asia to the Pacific and everywhere in between. Amy made the house cozy whether she was freezing in Greenland or sweating in Panama. Amy was a true bargain shopper. She could stretch my meager paycheck, horse trading, making deals on everything from food to furniture. Amy could haggle with anyone. Amy's only weakness was postcards. My God, that woman loved postcards. Wherever we went, Amy was sure to have a postcard of the place. On all of our moves around the world, Amy carried boxes of postcards from one end of the earth to the other. Kevin, Amy would say when I would pester her about postcards, I know where I'm from, but I want to know where I've been, because I'm not going to stay anywhere until we get to the top. We used a bunch of savings plus my meager paycheck and bought a fixer-upper house. It was a beautiful big old house with a huge yard, garage, just full of charm and character. Now, regional airline pilots make less than a manager at McDonald's, and my starting salary was just over $25,000. I didn't care. I had Amy, and I could fly almost every day. What could be better in life? Amy took a job with a real estate developer to make ends meet. My life consisted of Amy, flying, fixing up the house, and working on the Ford F-250 truck I bought cheap. At first, Amy rode the bus to work, but soon she had a new Camry. Amy said she needed reliable transportation since I was gone so often. Our life was great, and we christened every room in the house several times each, as well as the apartment room over the garage and even the backyard on a few warm, starry nights. Amy was still constantly sending out ads to all the airlines, from American to Federal Express, but with rising fuel prices and safety concerns, no one was hiring. I was willing to be patient. Life was good. In the morning, I had a ride to work with Jose, our head mechanic, waiting for me. Jose helped me a lot with my truck. We replaced or rebuilt every part from the rear end to the injectors. Jose escaped Cuba over 2 decades ago on a wholly homemade raft with his girlfriend, now wife Maria, at the age of 18. After his service, he took a profession as an aircraft mechanic. He had a bunch of kids and was the proudest dad you'd ever see. Today, we were riding with his youngest son, Angelo, a freshman in high school. Good morning, Jose, and young Mr. Angelo, I said as I buckled my seatbelt. Jose, we can stop by King 1 Developers. I need to drop off this cell phone. I picked up my wife's cell phone. Amy had left it on the kitchen table this morning. I wondered if she had forgotten it. Amy was always talking or texting on that little pink box. She was never without it. Angelo, like any teenager, was listening to an MP3 player on headphones. Seeing the phone in my hand, Angelo pulled out the headphones. Hey, Mr. Kevin, what a cool phone. Can I take a look at it? Really, Angelo? I tossed the phone to him in the back seat. Juan was fiddling with the radio when his son Angelo exclaimed, Oh, someone's going to get lucky today. What do you mean, Angelo? Said I, turning to face him in the back seat. Look at this message, Mr. Kevin, said Angelo, turning Amy's screen towards me. Protein lunch day 2? I read from the screen. What the hell does that mean? Angelo suppressed a laugh. Protein lunch today. The color disappeared from my face. Now watch the next one. Angelo scrolled down. There were a lot of messages with some guy and how they were having a good time together. I felt my breakfast coming to an end. Juan looked at me. Captain, are you okay? You're white as a ghost. Jose called all pilots captains. No, Jose, I suddenly felt very sick. Could you please take me home? I tried to speak normally. Angelo, can you tell me who sent those messages and maybe forward them to me? No problem, Mr. Kevin. Angelo pressed a few buttons on his phone. They're on their way to you now. The sender is one Troy, one Cabas. Troy Kingston was Amy's boss, the head of King One Developers. How bloody corny, a secretary having fun with her boss and me being the cuckold husband. My God, this was a bad script. Don't worry, Captain, said Jose, turning the car around. I'll have one of the other guys take over your duties for the day. Would you like me to take you to the doctor? No thanks, Jose. I tried to keep from lunging at him in the car. I just really need to get home and deal with this. The ride home seemed to take forever. Angelo kept reading aloud messages that made me sick with every word. Next chapter. I barely made it into the downstairs bathroom before I lost my entire morning meal. I splashed cold water on my face and sat on the bathroom floor, leaning my back against the tiled wall. This bathroom was the first bathroom Amy and I had remodeled. We didn't know much about tile work, even less about plumbing, but together, we made it work. Our way of celebrating after the bathroom remodel was completed left a smile on my face for 2 days. Maybe Amy's cheating, I thought. Troy Kingston was in his 50s, almost 2 decades older than both Amy and me. He was the kind of guy you think of when you picture a real estate developer. Twice married, 6 feet tall, trim build, permanent tan, dyed hair with plugs added to fill in the bald spots. Big, murmuring voice, always a handshake or a joke accompanied by a firm slap on the back. Maybe it was just a joke? Frantically, I hoped. It was all a crude joke by Amy and Troy. I knew Troy had 2 kinds of jokes, the ones he told in mixed company and the crude ones he told when only men were around. I felt better, my breathing returning to normal. I stopped by Amy's office under the pretense of taking her to her favorite diner and finding out what the hell was wrong. As I picked myself up off the floor, I saw that it was almost 11:30 in the morning. How long have I been sitting here? Feeling like a fool, I jumped in my truck and headed to Amy's office. As I entered the King One developer's office, I figured if this was a joke, Amy and I would laugh about it. I would have given Troy, her boss, a shitload of crap, but I knew he would laugh. I asked the receptionist to get Amy on the phone. The receptionist made a few calls and then said Amy wasn't available. I told the receptionist that I needed to return something to Amy. She gave me Amy's cell phone number. I already got it. I laughed, holding out Amy's cell phone. Just need to return it to her. Oh, the receptionist replied. So she's not here. I think I saw her leaving with Mr. Kingston. They usually have lunch at his house or at the club. Would you like to leave your phone with me? I tried to ignore my bad feeling. Don't worry, I'll find her later. Next chapter. I tried to control my breathing as I walked down the driveway to Troy Kingston's house. I had been to this house once before for an office Christmas party. The house was a huge mansion, made of plywood and stucco. In a good wind, it would just blow away. It had an Olympic swimming pool, a sunken 3-car garage under the bedroom, even a pseudo-fish pond in the backyard. Troy Kingston's big red Hummer H2 with the license plate. King 1-inch was parked outside the garage meaning Troy, and Amy must be inside. The front door wasn't locked, so I let myself in. There was a noise coming from the upstairs bedroom. Preparing myself for the worst, I climbed the stairs and headed for the master bedroom door. Putting my ear to the door, I heard the shower running. I pulled out Amy's cell phone, pressing the speed dial button. The muffled ringing of a cell phone was heard in the bedroom. I took a step back from the bedroom door. Troy Kingston, a voice answered. Hey, Troy, said I into my wife's cell phone. Listen, Amy left her cell phone at home this morning. The office said she was with you. Can you tell me where you are so I can give her the phone? Better yet, let me talk to Amy. Greetings, Kevin, Troy's voice came through the earpiece. We're on our way back to the office from the club right now. We just finished a working lunch with a client. Stopped by my house for a second to pick up some paperwork. Amy's in the restroom right now. Wait. I walked over to the bedroom door and opened it ajar. I saw Troy closing the mouthpiece and yelling into the bathroom. Damn it, Amy, come out! Your flyer is calling and asking for you. Amy stepped out of the shower. Wrapping a towel around her head, she sat on the bed. The fact that Troy and Amy were comfortable being around each other like this said they knew each other well. This wasn't a sudden fling, it had been going on for a long time. Hey, Kevin, said Amy, taking the phone from Troy. He sat down next to her. Amy began to flirt with Troy, cradling the phone between her ear and shoulder. How are you doing? I'm so glad you found my phone. I've been looking all over for it. At that moment, I pushed open the bedroom door and walked in. They both froze at my sudden appearance. Well, Amy, said I, pointing to her hand, I don't think you're going to find your phone between Troy's legs, or that cell phone detector either. Troy was the first to react. He jumped up and ran into the bathroom, slamming the door behind him. Amy was still lying on the bed. Get dressed, Amy. Let's get out of here so you can tell me what the hell you think you're doing, flushing our marriage down the drain. No, said Amy. What? Kevin, I'm not going anywhere with you. I'm sorry you caught us in such a condition, but I like living like this. I was stunned. You like living like a cheating whore? Amy's eyes flashed slightly. I never meant to offend you, Kevin, but I'm used to a better lifestyle than what you can provide. Troy can give me something you won't be able to do for a few more years, if at all. This. I circled my hand around the room. This is what you're throwing away our marriage for? I'm not throwing anything away, Kevin, Amy said calmly. I'm making a choice. We had a good marriage for almost 15 years. I was a good camp wife who followed you around the world living like a pauper, and it was fun at the time. But now I deserve better, and I don't intend to live the next decade clipping coupons and scrounging for sale items. She removed the towel from her hair. I'm sick of shopping at Walmart looking for half-price toilet paper. I want everything at once, not wait until I'm too old to enjoy it. You can't compare to what Troy has, and anything you can give me today doesn't compare to that. Troy knows how to treat me better than you do. I ask you to respect that and my decision. I was stunned. My mind just blocked. Respect what, Amy? A cheating wife and a man who hides in the bathroom? Amy just shrugged, looking back at me. All the oxygen was gone from the air. I had to get out before I passed out. I tossed the phone to Amy. I gave Amy the middle finger. Respect that, Amy. I turned to walk out the door as I suddenly said over my shoulder, You two deserve each other. I have flights tomorrow. Get out of my house. Next chapter. For the rest of the month, I was confused. They say grief goes through 7 stages, but I couldn't get past the shock and denial for 2 weeks. How could Amy do this to me? Had I really missed so many signs? Was I really such an ignorant fool, unable to notice what was right in front of my nose? I was trained to notice little things before they became big problems. A professional was supposed to notice the slightest signs, such as a change in air pressure, an engine noise. But how could I completely lose situational awareness in my own life? Every morning I would wake up and roll over, expecting to see Amy, and then the memories of the emotions would start all over again. After the 3rd week, the pain started. It was worse than any physical wound I had ever suffered. Amy ripped my heart out. Studies have shown that the brain's receptors register emotional pain as a real injury in the same way they respond to physical pain. I could attest to that. I felt grief-stricken. Jose, the head mechanic, and his wife Maria were a godsend. They were the only ones I told my story to. Jose and Maria were stunned. Leaving their spouse was as much a mystery to them as thermonuclear physics. Jose had taken a bullet for Maria during their escape from Cuba. Maria nursed the wounded Jose on a raft for several days, using up all her drinking water before a brothers to the rescue plane found them. Once in America, both worked 2 and sometimes 3 jobs while raising 6 children. While Jose served, Maria started and still runs a house cleaning business. The anger stage began at the end of the month when I got a call from the bank. I was overdrawn and my checks were bouncing. The meeting with the bank teller kicked off my anger stage. All the accounts were nearly empty. Amy had cleaned them out. I tried to get a new line of credit but was denied. The employee sympathized with me, but told me that Kingston did a lot of business with the bank. My account was flagged. As I ran out of the bank, there was a man standing by my truck. He handed me the divorce papers. As I got in the cab, I researched the legal intricacies and realized I was really screwed. Amy was claiming that the cost to repair my 8-year-old truck was equal to the cost of her new Camry. Amy had emptied all the accounts, even cashed in all the stocks and bonds. In return, she offered me a house. Using a grossly inflated appraisal of the value of the house and its equity with improvements made sense on paper, but not in the real world. I only had 10 business days to pay off the bank before it started foreclosure proceedings. Next chapter. There's not much you can do, Mr. Kevin. I sat at Juan's kitchen table with his oldest son. He was in his last year of law school. One of his family law professors was reviewing divorce papers and a settlement offer. Your ex-wife Amy can use the boyfriend's lawyers to score on you. You may win a battle or two, but you will lose the war. I thanked my son Juan for his help, and then tried to figure out what I needed to do. I needed money, and I needed it fast. I hated to do it, but my favorite truck had to go. Juan had a friend who needed a good truck for his landscaping business, so this sale netted $7,000. It allowed me to take a bit of a break, get out of foreclosure, and pay my upcoming taxes and insurance bills. Jose's wife, Maria, was still doing house cleaning and now office work as well. Every day for the next year, if I wasn't flying, I worked with Maria's cleaning crews. I biked if I was going somewhere. My frugality would make Scrooge blush. The only real food was the home-cooked meals that Juan and his wife Maria forced on me. Maria was constantly trying to set me up with some pretty Latina, but I couldn't even afford a can of soda, let alone a date. By the beginning of my second year, my divorce was behind me. I was able to get ahead and even took a day off from time to get back to housework. One day I found boxes of Amy's postcards. My first thought was to burn the damn postcards in the fireplace to help heat the house. I couldn't afford to pay any more court bills, so I got on my bike and rode to the local library. For someone with limited resources, the public library was a treasure. I used one of their computers to send Amy an email about the postcards. A reply from Amy came within the hour. The postcards are where I've been, not where I'm going. Do what you want with them. I printed out my original letter and Amy's reply in case I needed them, then headed home. That evening, I built a big fire in my old stone hearth. I even splurged on buying some marshmallows to roast. Watching those cards smoke was the first time I was able to fall asleep peacefully, and I even woke up without thinking about Amy. Next chapter. It had been over 2 years since the last time I'd seen Amy in the bedroom. Late one Friday night, I was driving back from the city to our small airport. We were taxiing onto the runway when the flight attendant of our small plane poked her head into the cramped cockpit. "We have a passenger problem," the stewardess said. "We have a guy who's had a few drinks and won't turn off his cell phone. Very rude and belligerent." "Tell him it's an FAA rule," I asked. "Yeah," she said. "The guy called me a couple different names." We were sixth in line for takeoff, so I told the first officer I'd take it from there. Usually, the sight of a uniform and a few stern words quieted the unruly passengers. This happened once every few months. It was annoying, but not a problem. As I stepped out of the cab, I was surprised to see a flushed Troy Kingston sitting in the fourth seat talking on his cell phone. He was yelling at some poor henchman on the other end. What shocked me even more was Troy's seat companion. It was my ex-wife, or what was left of my ex-wife Amy. She was wearing more bling than Mr. T had. Amy's hair was styled and dyed white, almost bleach blonde. Her once generous nose was gone, replaced by a tiny button. Amy's ears no longer protruded, but were cropped just enough to be invisible. Her lips, however, were as plump and pouty as a trout's. All her freckles were gone, and her skin was so tight on her face that it looked like an inflated balloon about to burst. There must have been 10 pounds of plastic in her new screw-on fake rack. At least I knew where the money from our accounts was going. Good thing Amy didn't waste it, muttered I to myself. Gathering my thoughts, I went into professional pilot mode. Mr. Kingston, I began, standing over the seated Troy. I must insist that you turn off your cell phone immediately. It could interfere with the safety of this airplane and put you and my passengers in danger. Troy noticed me for the first time. Back off, flyboy. I paid for my ticket. I'm trying to save a deal that's worth more than you and this shitty airline combined. Amy. I turned to her across the seat. Could you please talk some sense into your traveling companion? Don't talk to her, you penniless asshole. Troy pounced on me. Just because you're driving this flying bus doesn't mean anything, so back off. He went back to his conversation. I looked at Amy, but she only turned away to look out the window. Sighing, I went back into the booth and picked up the microphone. Ladies and gentlemen, I apologize for the delay, but we will be returning to the terminal for a few minutes. Please remain in your seats and we will continue the flight as soon as possible. I appreciate your patience. My first mate was already leading us out of the cab lane back to the gate. He had alerted airport security, and they had gathered to await our arrival. It was not a pleasant experience for Troy Kingston. 3 inappropriately boisterous airport police officers boarded the plane, followed by a Department of Homeland Security officer. Troy was led out in handcuffs. The Department of Homeland Security officer told me that Troy would be charged with interfering with an airplane crew, endangering the safety of an aircraft, and a host of other charges. Since the plane was on a runway, these were all federal offenses. A DHS spokesperson explained that Troy will spend the weekend in a holding cell because the federal court does not sit on weekends. As a bonus, he will be placed on the no-fly list as a flight risk. He will be automatically banned from any air travel for the next 90 days. Good luck getting on the do not fly list. To top it off, Troy was billed for the fuel used to get the plane to the runway, as well as landing time and other ground staff expenses. That wouldn't happen to a nicer guy, thought I as we taxied onto the runway. Next chapter. Jose, his wife Maria, and I were sitting at the kitchen table. Their middle daughter had just started medical school. She's so smart, my daughter. Jose had a few drinks to celebrate. She's going to be a rocket surgeon. I smiled, but declined his offer to fill my glass. Jose had a right to be proud. Seeing Jose with his wife Maria made me sad for a moment about Amy and me. Not like that worthless Amy, said Maria. Captain, why don't you let me find you a nice Latina? I'll treat you good. I hid a smirk. Maria never lost her accent and always tried to play matchmaker. Maria, you know I'm a little skittish after the last time I met you. Ah, Maria interrupted, and then mumbled something in machine gun Spanish to her husband Jose. Captain, you'd better do without this wife. She's no good. No argument, I replied. Maria scooted closer to me. Amy didn't know what she had. Amy's old wife is sad now, not happy. I perked up my ears. I thought for the most part I had already forgotten Amy. Being upset with her was like taking poison and waiting for the other person to die. But everyone loves gossip, especially if it involves your ex-wife. Come on, Maria, what do you know? I teased her. Maria, with her small army of cleaners, housekeepers, and assistants, had an intelligence network that the CIA and Israeli Mossad would envy. Well, began Maria, my girls say Amy isn't that good. There are no other wives like her. They're afraid she'll try to steal their husband too. The other wives call Amy lemon pie. Amy throws a lot of parties. The other wives don't come. Some husbands come, but they look at Amy like a dog looks at meat. She doesn't like it, and Mr. Kingston gets angry. No more parties. I stifled a laugh. Amy is angry that Mr. Kingston won't marry her. He doesn't give Amy much money, and she complains a lot. The girls say Mr. Kingston doesn't trust Amy. He doesn't want Amy to leave home. Mr. Kingston always checks Amy's phone and, as you say, often interrogates Amy when she comes back from trips. One day, Mr. Kingston hired a private police force to keep an eye on Amy. Amy found out about it and got very angry. I poured myself a drink. Well, Maria, what else would you expect? There's no honor among thieves and crooks. I hope they enjoy looking over each other's shoulder all the time. Marie continued. She was on a roll. I always send the older ladies to Mr. Kingston's house. He's a bad man, always trying to touch the younger girls. Amy always blames it on the girls. Complains to me that the girls treat Mr. Kingston badly. I know that's not true, but I'm not saying that if Amy can't satisfy Mr. Kingston, why blame the girls? No one wants to clean his house. He never tips the employees. Stop talking about silly old wife Amy, said Jose. Captain, you and I are going golfing tomorrow. I won a round of golf at 9 Rivers Country Club last week in the church raffle. You play golf, Jose? I asked. Yes. Jose looked at Maria, his wife. When we came to America, Maria saw that all successful Americans play golf. So Maria bought me golf clubs on sale and made me take lessons. And all the kids, too. But the damn wife will never let me rent a golf cart. Maria looked at her husband sternly. We need to save up money for college for the kids. You're not a cripple. God gave you good legs. It would be an insult to God if you didn't use the legs he gave you. Jose threw his hands up, but I noticed a hint of a smile on their faces. Jose reached for Maria's hand. I finished my drink, wished them both good night, and got up to leave. Next chapter. Jose brought his son's clubs for me to use. I had sold mine at a yard sale a long time ago to make some extra money after the divorce. It was a great day, the first time in a long time I hadn't flown, worked, cleaned, or done chores around the house. My good mood was broken as I stood at the entrance to the clubhouse. On the wall hung a large picture of Troy Kingston and Amy. Troy was a board member of the 9 Rivers Country Club. The picture was of some award or event they were attending. Jose saw me looking at the large framed photo. He caught my sour mood. Captain, said Jose, pointing to the entrance. Look over there and tell me if anyone is coming. Why? Asked I. Shh, replied Jose. Just look over there and stay alert, okay? I stood with my back to Jose and stared at the entrance for a few minutes, feeling like a fool. Finally, Jose said, Okay, that's fine. We can go now. I turned around and snorted loudly when I saw what Jose had done. Jose took a thick black marker and drew a big-handled mustache and teeth and devil horns on Troy's picture. The resemblance to Amy was no better. Big nose, big ears, eyeliner, a scattering of moles. What are you, 12 years old? Exclaimed I. But my mood was improved by Jose's juvenile antics. Come on, Captain, let's go play golf. Jose grinned and we picked up our bags. And I was having a lot of fun as we approached the 7th hole. There was a couple standing on the green in front of us. An elderly man was making a shot. We were silent, waiting for him to finish. Suddenly, he dropped his club, grabbing his arm, and fell to the ground, gasping for breath. Jose and I dropped our club bags and rushed to the green. A silver-haired woman about the same age was shaking the fallen man, trying to dial a cell phone number. When Jose and I approached the man, he was no longer breathing. Jose, start CPR! I leaned over the man and started CPR on his chest. Call 911. I shouted to the silver-haired woman standing next to us. I don't have a connection, she shouted panikedly. Jose pulled out his cell phone. Damn, Captain, I have no coverage either. I looked at my phone. It had the no coverage symbol on it. Lady, you're going to have to get help, I shouted to the woman. I can't leave my husband, she screamed. Leave now to call an ambulance and help him survive, or stay and watch him die. I spat at her. She turned and ran towards the club, the visor falling off her silver hair. Jose and I continued to take turns, but after 10 minutes we felt tired. I realized we weren't going to last much longer. I was making a mouth-to-mouth when an electric golf machine almost ran over my foot. I never heard the damn thing pull up. It was the girl driving the beverage cart. She jumped out of the cart, turned around, and dropped the trays of drinks and cans on the ground. She flipped open the back lid of the cart and pulled out a small, hard plastic case. Kneeling down next to me, she opened the case and pulled out a portable defibrillator like you see in malls and airports. Stand back, she said, pushing me aside and ripping open the guy's shirt. You. She pointed at Jose. Take the golf cart and go get help. Jose jumped into the cart and rushed as fast as the little electric motor would allow. I leaned back in my seat as the girl from the beverage cart attached sensors from the kit to the guy's chest. The computer voice from the kit was issuing memorized instructions. I saw the girl press a large orange button labeled shock. The guy lying on the ground's chest bounced once, then once more, his eyes opened. The girl felt for his pulse, then turned to me. He's breathing, but we have to give him real medical attention or he'll die. She turned to the man lying on the ground again. I wiped my sweaty forehead with my hand, looking at the girl from the drink cart. She was a young, slender Hispanic woman of about 25 with long black hair tied back in a ponytail. Her name tag read, 9 Rivers Country Club Lords. I started to say something when suddenly there was the roar of a diesel engine. A Ford F-250 pickup truck pulled out from the edge of the field onto the green and stopped next to us. The truck was loaded with gardening tools. A magnetic Rowell and Sons landscaping sign hung on the door. Jose jumped out of the driver's side. Recognize your old truck, Captain? That damn kid's golf cart's battery died. I saw that monster and figured we had a better chance of taking the kid straight to the hospital. I pointed to the guy lying on the ground. Jose, bandage his legs and I'll take care of his chest. I turned to the girl from the drink cart. Lords, I'm Kevin, and this is Jose. Let's get this guy out of here. We climbed into the cab, Lords and the guy in front. I moved into the driver's seat, and Jose squeezed into the third seat behind the cab. I made sure everyone was buckled in and started the engine. The Power Stroke diesel roared loudly. Hold on! It's about to get rough! I put the truck in gear and drove it straight down the fairway. Lords pointed to the path. Take that path over there. That's the fastest way to get to the main gate. We'll go a little off the beaten path, I told Lords. I'd flown over this area 1,000 times. The pilot's keen eye told me which terrain would get us to the hospital the fastest. The shortest distance between 2 points is a straight line, and that's the route I was going to take. It would save us 7 to 10 minutes. Minutes that I knew we didn't have to waste. The Ford's tires tore up the sod as we flew down the fairway. Honking my horn, I whizzed through the back 9 and sped through part of the sand trap. Lourdes was talking to a guy while Jose struggled for life in the tight space. We approached the outer edge of the field and its high chain-link fence. Lourdes gestured to the south. There's an old gate about a mile from here. We don't need no stinking gate, growled I in my best movie accent. Grab onto something. I kept my foot on the gas pedal as we made our way through the fence. Ford Power Stroke versus Chinese metal fence. No contest. Score 1 in favor of American diesel power. Hey, Captain, got a signal, Jose said, holding out his phone as we raced down the road toward the hospital, pushing the speedometer to triple digits. Lord snatched the phone out of Jose's hands. She dialed a few numbers. Lords must have gotten through to the hospital because she pronounced medical terms that sounded like VTAC, pulse, all in Greek to me. Lords slammed the phone down. I grinned and said, "Not bad for a drink cart girl." The tires squealed as we jerkily turned toward the hospital entrance. Lords gave me a hard look. "I'm a nurse, dumbass." "Oh," was all I could manage to mutter as we stopped at the entrance to the emergency room, where a team of doctors was waiting for us. Next chapter. After that, Jose and I were local heroes at the airport for another week. However, no good deed goes unpunished. It was about that long before I received a registered letter from the Nine Rivers County Club. It contained a detailed bill for the damage my little jaunt had caused to the golf course. The total repair amounted to $247.88.12. The letter demanded immediate payment, cash or bank check, or the matter would be turned over to their legal department. I laughed out loud, crumpled the letter into a ball, and tossed it in the trash. You can't squeeze blood out of a turnip, I thought to myself. I never found out who the guy was, or if he ever recovered at all. He must have been a big shot, because as soon as his condition stabilized, an air ambulance helicopter took him to a waiting air ambulance plane for departure. I tried calling Lourdes. The operator at Nine Rivers Country Club curtly informed me that Lourdes no longer worked at Nine Rivers. I made inquiries on my own for about a week before I enlisted the help of Jose's wife, Maria. It took Maria about 15 minutes to have chapters and stanzas about Lourdes, from phone number, address to shoe size, on her Latina Women's Network. Maria began talking about Lourdes as if she were giving a briefing. Lourdes was 26 years old, the only daughter of her father, an immigrant laborer whom Lourdes cared for until his death. Her mother died when Lourdes was still a child. She had never married, had just gotten her nursing degree, but had not yet taken the nursing exam, and worked the 3 p.m. to 11 p.m. shift at Mercy Nursing Home. Lourdes rented a room, wasn't dating anyone, and loved vanilla ice cream with sprinkles. "That's it?" teased Maria when she finished. "No birthmarks? Known wanted or warrants?" Maria looked at me with a smug smile. "Lourdes is a good girl. Goes to Mass every Sunday at St. Paul S. Would you like me to set you two up?" She rummaged in her pocket for her cell phone. No, Maria." I jumped up. "Thanks for the cell phone and Lourdes' address. I think I'll take it from here." I heard Maria's laughter as I walked out of her house. Next chapter. The next day, Lourdes was waiting for me on the steps of the house when I approached her with flowers in my hands. Lourdes saw the surprise on my face. She smiled. "Why did you wait so long, Kevin?" How... You knew I was coming," I stuttered. "The Latina Women's Network works both ways, Kevin." Lourdes laughed. She stood up and took my flowers, then turned to walk up the stairs. "You haven't had a chance. Stay there while I put them in water." Lourdes was a pleasure to talk to. She told me how she had combined school, nursing homework, school, and until recently a job as a beverage delivery girl at the Nine River Country Club. "Kevin," began Lourdes, "I had and still have a lot of loan and tuition debt. My job at the nursing home covers the rent and daily living expenses. I made good money at that job serving drinks. It helped me pay off my debts and spend money on my nursing exam prep course and the nursing exam, as well as testing fees." "Lourdes, what happened to working as a drink delivery girl at Nine Rivers?" I asked. Lourdes wrinkled her nose before answering. "After our little monster truck ride, the Nine Rivers Board of Directors fired me. Claimed I left the country club grounds without working the allotted time. I know it was that board member, that asshole Troy Kingston. He's been trying to get me to sleep with him ever since I started working there. Now that Kingston guy entertains the secretary every Wednesday during lunch break." Lourdes shuddered as if from the cold. "I shudder at the thought of that vile Slytherin touching me. What a snake." I wasn't surprised that Lourdes knew of my situation and marriage status. The Latin Women Network spawned a lot of gossip. Most of them were exaggerated and erroneous, as I found out. "You know, Kevin," said Lourdes, "most of the gossip says your wife left you to switch. A minority say she left because you were gay." I suppressed a laugh. Where did being gay come from? Well, Lourdes looked a little embarrassed as she spoke. Some of the girls on the cleaning crew showed more than a passing interest in helping you through your grief. The hemlines of skirts got higher and the necklines of blouses got deeper. You never noticed it or reacted in any way, so they assumed you must be gay. Now I laughed. Oh, you must be talking about Anita and Orlando. There's no way I haven't noticed those two Latina girls and their attempts to cheer me up. I slammed myself on my knee. Lourdes, you can thank these two ladies for their efforts, but I have a very firm policy of, how can I put this simply? I don't eat where I shit. Lourdes chuckled. Good. I'm glad that didn't go unnoticed. I take it from your tone that your ex-wife didn't have that policy about eating at work? Lourdes, to be blunt, my ex-wife Amy can eat crap. Next chapter. I wanted to see more of Lourdes. Kevin, I'm not a prude, but I'm not easy on the eyes either, said Lourdes. Can we meet tomorrow? Lourdes, I'm working on the house tomorrow. I'm having trouble getting the door hinged. I replied. Maybe you made the mortise holes too shallow. How did you adjust the reveal? Asked Lourdes. Morty disclosure to whom? I was puzzled. Lourdes only rolled her eyes. Good God, Kevin! Give me your address. I'll see you early tomorrow morning. Lourdes had grown up surrounded by her father, a day laborer and handyman. What Lourdes knew about home repair and remodeling could rival the gang from the former TV show This Old House. When she didn't know, Lourdes would show up at my house with one of her residents from the nursing home where she worked. This home was home to retired craftsmen in every profession imaginable. These old folks loved to get out and spend the day teaching us their specialties, from tile work to plumbing. It was like having our own union of home repair contractors. We didn't have a lot of free time because of our schedules, but every spare minute we had was spent together. With each meeting, Lourdes and I grew closer, but it wasn't the closeness I dreamed of. Next chapter. The night did go better, and the morning was even better. Lourdes, I've been thinking about this for a long time. Will you move in with me? Kevin, I'm not some slut moving into any bed after a night out, said Lourdes. Lourdes, I'd like you in my bed every night. I sat up in bed, admiring her. But that's also a more sensible suggestion. It'll be cheaper for us to live together than apart, and you'll save money on rent. It'll help you reach your goal faster, taking the nursing course, passing the nursing exam, and all that. Kevin, I'm not a freeloader, replied Lourdes. I'm not some slut trading my ass for free room and board. I always pay for everything. You're still going to pay, Lourdes. I grabbed her towel. I'll still trade you the repairs you make to this house in lieu of rent. Personally, I feel like I should be paying you for everything you've done. I get more value out of the deal. Lourdes threw back the towel, then sat down on the bed next to me and thought. I held my breath. Finally, she turned to me. Kevin, do you think your friend Jose will lend us his truck to move my stuff on Friday? Next chapter. We had been together for over 6 months now. The house had never been in better condition, and I was happy. Of course, I was still working, cleaning houses and picking up all the flying hours the FAA allowed. But Lourdes came into my life. I wanted to ask Lourdes to marry me, but I knew she wanted to get her license and have a career before settling down. The housing crash affected even our town. It affected King 1 developers the most. The company collapsed and burned within a week. The whole operation was like a house of cards. The bank withdrew several loans, and King 1 developers collapsed. Federal regulators began to take a closer look. Troy played with the rules, mixed funds, and mortgaged himself to the hilt, even real estate he didn't really own. He didn't even have enough money to file bankruptcy. However, Troy Kingston took it like the man he was. Late one night, dressed in his best suit, he got into a shiny H2 Hummer with a bottle of JW, started the engine, closed the garage door, and sucked in the exhaust. I felt sorry for the people and the financial mess this coward Troy left behind, but not for him. Oddly enough, thoughts of how this would affect my ex-wife Amy didn't even cross my mind. She was in the past, and I was looking forward to Lourdes in the future. A few weeks later, I was walking home from the bus stop when I saw a lone figure sitting on my porch steps. It was dusk, but even in the pitch darkness, I realized who it was. "Hi, Amy," said I, standing over her. "Hi, Kevin," replied Amy. She looked at me but made no move to get up. "Amy, I'd like to say it's good to see you, but we both know that would be a lie. If you'll excuse me, I just finished a long day. I'd like to get to my house. Let me through, please." Amy didn't move. "Why are you walking? Kevin, where's your truck?" "Amy, you're sitting on it." Amy looked around confused, then said, "Oh, you mean you sold it for the house? I get it now. Why Kevin? You loved that truck." "I loved a lot of things back then, Amy. When you're forced to, you learn to do without a lot. That truck never let me down, unlike other things back then. The difference is, I still miss that truck to this day." "How about me, Kevin? Do you ever miss me? Kevin, you know us?" said Amy softly. I couldn't help myself. "Of course, Amy, I miss you with every bullet." Amy sighed, but I continued. "Besides, Amy, how can I miss you? You haven't left yet." "Kevin, please, can we talk? I just got out of the hospital 2 weeks ago." "Amy, I'm sorry to hear you've been ill, and I wish you a speedy recovery. However, I don't see how your health could be any more of a concern to me. You have made it clear that you are not satisfied with the level of care I was able to provide. A few years ago, you chose Troy, his care and all his toys over me. Us." "Yes, Kevin, but I almost died. When Troy had his procedure in the garage that night with the smoking exhaust pipes of the Hummer, I was asleep in the upstairs bedroom. The carbon monoxide leaking from his H2 almost killed me." "Geez, Amy, it looks like those H2 Hummer H2S are really bad for the environment. In retrospect, I can tell you that you should have talked Troy into driving a hybrid." "That's not funny, Kevin." I rubbed my chin with my hand. "I'm sorry, Amy, but I'm tired. Maybe we'll just go our separate ways. This isn't going to be good for either of us." "Kevin," Amy pleaded, "please let's go inside for a few minutes. I need to talk to you." I sighed and pointed to the door, walking up the porch steps. Amy started to get up. I had forgotten how tall she was. I looked at Amy's face. She was trying to smile, but something wasn't right. It wasn't just her new nose and big lips. Something was odd, but I couldn't make out what it was in the dim evening light. In her right hand, Amy held a cane, which she leaned heavily on. The medium-sized gym bag she was sitting on was crumpled. I silently picked up Amy's gym bag as she climbed the steps to the front door with great difficulty. I walked past Amy and unlocked the door, opening it for her. This is going to be one hell of a conversation, I thought. Next chapter. Amy and I sat at the dining room table. In the light, I saw that Amy's face had changed. All one side of her face was a frozen mask. One eyelid half closed, the corner of her mouth curved downward. It was more noticeable because of the size of Amy's lips. A small amount of saliva had formed, which Amy was constantly wiping away with a handkerchief. "It was a stroke, Kevin," Amy began, "the result of carbon monoxide poisoning. I was lucky the maid came in early or I would have died. One side of my body is very weak and I have trouble with short-term memory. It gets worse when I'm tired." "Amy, I'm sorry to hear that. How are you doing now?" I asked. "Kevin, that's why I'm here. I need the money." I spit out a mouthful of coffee onto the dining room table. It took a few coughs before I stopped choking. I got up from the table to grab a rag from the kitchen. When I came back, I wiped everything down. "Amy, you're not kidding. I'm truly sorry for your condition, but I'm living on the edge myself." I didn't need to add, "because of you." Amy lowered her gaze to the table and didn't meet my gaze. "Besides," I continued, "you must have some assets after, uh, time with Troy. Last time I saw you, you had more bling than a rap star." "Kevin, it's all gone." Amy wiped the corner of her mouth. "Troy pawned it all in the days leading up to the collapse, trying to keep the creditors at bay. What was left was grabbed by bankruptcy attorneys. After Troy's suicide, the police turned the house into a crime scene. Last week, I was finally able to get inside and get that pile of clothes. Amy pointed to the gym bag at her feet. I slept at the women's shelter at night and ate at the church kitchen. What about social services? Disability? I asked. I filled out a bunch of forms. Most of them are reviewed for 90 days. The official has already told me that my injuries don't qualify, which would make me unable to work or claim benefits, explained Amy. Amy, surely you have friends in Troy's entourage who can help you. Not anymore, not even then. Amy laughed humorlessly. Those bitches have made it clear they don't want me around. They're afraid of what I might do to their husbands for money. I can't blame them. At the time, I wasn't exactly hindering male attention. No one wants to help a possible gold digger. It's like buying a rope to hang yourself with. Who would trust a cheating woman next to their boyfriend? I also managed to piss off all our mutual friends. After the divorce, they all took your side. I burned a lot of bridges. Okay, Amy, sell your Camry. It's only a few years old. When we bought it, this was a top-of-the-line model with all the features we needed. It will provide a quick source of funds, I suggested. Amy's face turned red. Kevin, the Camry was never mine. Troy bought it for me when he and I became friends. The title was in the name of the developer of King 1, as I found out later. The bank confiscated it along with everything else. I was surprised that after all these years, this new information brought back my buried emotions. It suddenly seemed to me that Amy's cheating had happened yesterday. I tried to restrain my tone. Amy, you got that car less than 4 months after we moved here. You started having fun with that bastard before the ink on the mortgage was even dry. No, Kevin. Amy turned away. Troy and I didn't start doing this only 6 months after I started working. I'm sorry, Amy, I said sarcastically. I didn't mean to imply that your virtue was somehow compromised if you waited another 2 months to spread your legs. Damn it, Kevin. Don't you think I don't know I screwed up? This is a tough one. I never meant for us to end up like this. It just overwhelmed me. Amy looked at my listless face. Kevin, are you sure you want to hear about this? Sure, Amy. Why wouldn't I? I waved my hand. They say the truth will set you free. Go ahead and try. It's not a try, Kevin. I just want you to know that nothing was your fault. It was all on me. I got caught up in it. You didn't do anything. It was great at first. When I started at King 1 Developers, I was treated like a queen. Troy always drove everyone away and picked up the check. It was such a change to not have to look at the prices on the menu, count change, or worry about the cost of anything. He started paying attention to me. Troy knew all these important people. They treated me like I was somebody. You were somebody, Amy. You've been my wife, my partner since we were kids. Isn't that enough? I know that now, Kevin. I just wish I'd remembered it then. It all started the day you left for 3 days on a charter flight. Troy brought me to a political fundraising dinner for $2,500 a plate. Kevin, my dinner alone could have paid for 2 months of our mortgage. Did you get chicken or fish? Kevin, stop it. I'm trying to be serious. Troy has been really nice to me for a few weeks. But this was a big deal. Troy bought me a $2,000 evening gown just for this evening. He didn't even bristle at the price. He acted like it was a small thing. Everyone thought I was Troy's girlfriend and treated me great. We were sitting at a table with the former Vice President of the United States. I was consumed by it all. The people, the glamour, the power, I just lost my head. It was like I used to play as a child. I was totally enthralled by it all, walking on air all night. Somehow Troy and I ended up in the parking lot and had fun in his H2 Hummer. The valet must have gotten a hell of a tip, I commented. Kevin, please, it wasn't like that, objected Amy. What do you call it, Amy? Stylish? Having fun in the parking lot. More like a $20 hooker on a street corner. Did you lower the moonroof to make it more romantic? Did you give old Troy a runaround in his Hummer? Amy at least blushed, but continued. I was so embarrassed the next day, feeling guilty and afraid you'd find out. I stuck to you like glue when you came home to make up for my time with Troy. Wow, Amy. And here I thought that's how you paid all the plumbers. Kevin, I swore it wouldn't happen again. I was going to be the best wife. We were going to be the best couple ever. I was going to quit this job first thing. But Troy was full of apologies, begging for forgiveness, claiming we both had too much to drink, couldn't help himself. It was an accident that would never happen again. He didn't want to lose me as a valued employee over a one-time mistake. Blah, blah, blah. He was so smooth, and like a fool, I fell for it. If you remember, a week later, a few secretaries, myself, and other executives went with Troy to the coast to complete a huge project. He had a large private jet chartered. It was so exciting that Troy landed a multi-million-dollar deal. On the way back, everyone was celebrating. A few drinks, joyful hugs, and suddenly in the airplane bathroom, Troy and I, you know what I mean. I couldn't help myself. Amy, I can see how all this elegance has made you weak. Kevin, I'm not proud of what I did. I'm not making excuses. I'm just telling you what happened. After that trip, I just gave up and started enjoying the lifestyle. Gambling, fine wine, expensive food, jewelry. At first, it was only when you were away. Then it evolved into lunches with a few midday guests. Soon I became so comfortable that I began to resent you and the way we were living. That's when I realized I had put our relationship in jeopardy. The saddest part is that it wasn't really Troy's money. It was King One developer's corporate money. Troy didn't have any money of his own. Most of his paycheck came from his two ex-wives. His Hummer was leased. Even the house, the Rolex watch, and almost everything else was in the company's name. Amy looked at me. Well, Kevin, that's my sad and pathetic story. Do you have any questions? Just a couple, Amy. I folded my hands on the table. If you had the lifestyle you wanted, why didn't you divorce me right away? Why did you spend another year and a half secretly cheating on me? What was the thrill of living between the wealth of Prince Troy and the rags of a pauper husband? Amy looked away. Kevin, at first it was because I didn't want to hurt you. We've been together since elementary school. You were my best friend. I kept telling myself that I was just going through a phase. It would be over soon. You'll never know. You won't be hurt. We'll live happily ever after. But it was hard. All these things I didn't have before made me feel like royalty. For the first time, I wasn't a kid standing outside the candy store window looking in. I kept putting off ending my time with Troy. I was a fly drowning in honey. Amy wiped the saliva leaking from the corner of her mouth again. That day you found me in Troy's bedroom stunned me. I was in a state of panic. I was sure you would never take me back after what I had done. But what could I do? I was past the point of no return. Half a loaf with Troy was better than nothing. Amy, how about choosing the truth? I said sarcastically. We could have made up if you had come to me after the first time. Kevin, I know you're going to find this hard to believe, but I was going to end it in 2 days. Even if you hadn't found out, I was going to quit my job and end the whole sordid affair that same Friday, cold turkey. I was determined to devote myself to you, to us, our marriage, and our future. My resignation letter was already printed, signed, and dated. It was sitting in my desk drawer at work. Nice try, Amy. Now you're making me sad that I barged in on you and Troy. If I had waited 2 more days, all of this could have been avoided. It's all my fault. I was such a fool. There was irony in my voice. I bet you don't happen to have that letter with you right now, do you? No, Kevin. I can't prove it. I can't disprove it. It won't help now, but after I moved in with Troy, I got bored. Everything revolved around Troy. I had more fun on my own. Okay, Amy, that's a standard question for guys. Was it because Troy was better in bed than me? I could see Amy hesitating, trying to think of an answer. If I want someone to lie to me about my abilities, I'll hire a prostitute. If you're not a prostitute, you don't have to lie. Let's find out the truth. Kevin, began Amy, you and I were the first, and before Troy, you were the only man. We were always good together, no complaints. But Troy was, well, older, more experienced. Troy had been with many partners over time. I just felt like I indebted to Troy, for all the things he did for me and gave me. You mean payment for services rendered? I asked. Kevin, I wasn't a prostitute or a whore, if that's what you're implying, Amy said cheerfully. Amy, what do you call someone who does that for goods or services? That was different, stated Amy stiffly. If he walks like a duck and quacks like a duck, he's a prostitute by any other name, began I. Whatever. You're even having fun in my house? In our bed? No, Kevin, never, exclaimed Amy. Troy wanted to, but for me, it wasn't about the fun or the affair or Troy or even you. It was about lifestyle, about things, people, places. For the first time in my life, I was doing it first rate. I wanted to get away from it. Rise above it. Amy looked around the dining room. Not go back to it. Amy, it seemed like Troy had no problem sharing you for a year and a half while you were cheating on me. Did he continue to be as generous with his friends or others after you moved in with him? Troy was very jealous, Kevin. Troy wanted me to cut you off after he and I started, you know. But I ignored him. I've never had, a relationship with both of you on the same day. Troy loved putting me out there, but hated it when I even talked to other men, and constantly accused me of hanging around him. Ironic, because now I know he had girlfriends all over the world. Not to mention the escorts and call girls he invited when he went out of town. However, Troy always made sure it was just the three of us, with another woman. One day I did give in. It was with his second wife. Troy was still on good terms with her. I didn't really get into it. She was a trophy wife straight out of a central casting Hollywood movie, just a dense blonde with bleach in her head. What exactly was the difference between you and her? I asked. Touch C. Amy wrinkled her nose. As sad as it sounds, back then I thought the blonde had it all. The money, the looks, the airplane seat up front, the lifestyle I wanted. I used to laugh at empty-headed fools like that, and then I became one of them. I started turning into a plastic Barbie. Did I pay for all of Barbie's makeup? Or did Troy invest in the silicone? Amy wrinkled her nose again. Kevin, it wasn't your money. Troy hid the cost of the surgery in the budget of some project of his. I'm afraid the auditors are going to want their money back. You've always been good at bargaining, Amy. You can use some of the bedroom tricks Troy taught you to close the deal. Kevin, I can't live like this. I just want to shrivel up and die. Amy, if you want to leave this life the Troy way, I can't help you. I have a garage, but I don't have a car right now, sorry. I really shouldn't have continued to make cheap jokes about Amy. It was like punching a rabbit. But I couldn't help it. Deep anger kept bubbling to the surface. I thought I was over Amy, but was I? They say love and hate are two sides of the same coin. I couldn't figure out what I was feeling. Disgust at the physical creature Amy had turned herself into, or anger at what she had done to me, to us, to our relationship. Kevin, began Amy, I know a lot has happened, but before this mess, we were always there for each other. I really need you now. We've been together most of our lives. We've both grown and changed. Can't we try to keep what we had? I stood up. Amy, I'd rather chew tinfoil and shave my head with a cheese grater. I finished my cooled coffee. I don't know who you are anymore, and I just don't trust you. How can I be sure you haven't hidden a bunch of money and jewelry? Maybe you're just waiting for the dust to settle so you can laugh at ignorant fool Kevin again, and then leave me with nothing. Amy leaned back in her chair, losing hope. I'll never leave you again. Please, I need your help. I'm sorry, Amy, I can't afford to take that risk anymore. The stakes are too high. I can't help you. Can't or won't? Asked Amy. What difference does it make? Replied I. At that moment, the door opened and Lourdes walked in. She was dressed in flowered napkins and was returning from her afternoon shift of 11 at the nursing home. I couldn't believe Amy and I had talked for so long. It was almost midnight. Oh, hi, said Lourdes, looking around at the surroundings, and then walked over to Amy and leaned over slightly and extended her right hand. I'm Lourdes, and you are? With an effort, Amy raised her hand to take Lourdes's hand. I'm Amy. Lourdes froze in shock, but quickly regained her composure and looked back at Amy. She considered Amy, her cane, as well as her limp arm and facial features. Bell's palsy? Asked Lourdes, pointing to Amy's face. I beg your pardon? Replied Amy. Bell's palsy, stated Lourdes professionally, looking at Amy's face. Damages the nerve that controls the facial muscles, resulting in paralysis. Very common with herpes. I don't have herpes, said Amy defensively, bringing her hand up to her face. Then she softened. But I can see how you might think that after what I did to Kevin. Amy sighed. I had a stroke. Amy continued to tell Lourdes the whole story. After Amy finished her story, Lourdes asked if she could talk to me in the kitchen. Kevin, began Lourdes, we can't just throw Amy out on the street. Okay, I said. Let me call one of Jose's sons. They can drop Amy off at the shelter. Lourdes grabbed my hand so tightly I felt her nails digging into my skin. Kevin, you can't be serious. You can't leave a woman in that condition in one of these places. They'll eat her alive. What do you want me to do, Lourdes? How about inviting Amy into our bed? The three of us? You heard me. It wouldn't be Amy's first time with another babe. Or maybe that's what you're doing right now. I raised an eyebrow at Lourdes and gave her a mocking look. Lourdes loosened her grip and waved me away. You men are all the same. Put your fantasies away. More like my nightmare, I replied. Losing you to Amy would have me sucking on the tailpipe. Whatever. Lourdes rolled her eyes. Amy can sleep on the couch tonight. We'll decide the rest in the morning. Who is this Lourdes? Some Latin version of the Italian mafia godfather's testament of keep your friends close and your enemies even closer? I saw the way you jerked Amy around with that remark about herpes with Bell's palsy. Lourdes lowered her eyes. Yeah, I should have done that. It was bitchy of me to kick someone when they're down. Lourdes sighed. And then I remembered WWJD. It's just one night. You better count the silverware when you wake up, I objected. Kevin, we don't have any silverware worth taking, replied Lourdes. Lourdes, doesn't it bother you that my ex-wife, given her reputation, would sleep in this house? Asked I. Lourdes looked at me seriously for a moment. I know you, and more importantly, I trust you. Besides, if you leave me for plastic and trout lips, you were never mine anyway. Lourdes, that's never going to happen, so you're stuck with me. I kissed her. Next chapter. The next morning at 6 a.m., I was in the kitchen, dressed in my maintenance jumpsuit. I wasn't flying today, but I was supposed to be cleaning 3 houses for Jose Maria's wife's company. Good morning, Kevin. It was Amy, standing in the entrance to the kitchen with a blanket wrapped around her. She had her hair sleeping on the couch. I only hummed, turning away to attend to my cup of coffee. Kevin, do you still have our boxes of cards? Asked Amy and yawned. Those were your cards, Amy. And no, I don't have your postcards anymore. Where are they? Persisted Amy. I burned them, Amy. In fact, I roasted marshmallows on them, sort of like the flames of our past. Oh, said Amy with an unhappy look. I sat down and stirred my coffee. For a few minutes, we were both silent. Kevin, I just want to thank you for letting me stay the night, said Amy. Don't thank me, Amy. I wasn't thrilled with the idea. Thank you, Lourdes, replied I. Yes, Lourdes. Amy paused. You and her? She interrupted. I didn't answer anything. My relationship with Lourdes was none of Amy's business. Kevin! Amy started wiping saliva from her busted lip. I don't know if I said that last night, but I'm sorry. Sorry for what, Amy? For cheating? For leaving? Taking all the money? Ruined our marriage? Lied? Trying to take more money after bankrupting me? Coming back to ruin my life? Or do you wish you had all the toys Troy gave you in your life anymore? You need to be more specific. I'm sorry I wanted something more than you did, Amy said softly. That sounds more like buyer's remorse to me. I stood up and poured the rest of my coffee into the sink. Tell me, Amy, if the house of cards hadn't collapsed and you still had all the advantages of the last 3 years, Would you still be here today? Kevin, I'm sorry I left you, I heard Amy say as I rinsed my coffee cup. I felt a touch on my shoulder. I turned around. Amy was standing in front of me. I see someone is glad I stayed the night, said Amy. Don't flatter yourself, Amy. Kevin, I meant what I said last night. I'm yours and yours alone. You can do anything you want to me. Anytime, anywhere, anywhere. Amy held out her hand. I've read that text once before, Amy. I'll pass. I headed out the door. Next chapter. I realized that my first big fight with Lourdes was going to be over Amy. I just wanted Amy out of my life. It was someone else's problem. Both Lourdes and Maria lashed out at me. Jose, Maria's husband, wisely made sure he was out of sight. I wish I could have done the same. All the talk about Christian charity, forgiveness, and turning the other cheek was fine in theory, but in practice it totally sucked. However, two Catholic Latina women who believe God is on their side are a force of nature. Both were adamant that it is our duty to help those in need if we can. Bread thrown on water and all that. They tried to explain that forgiveness doesn't mean I have to forget what Amy did to me. These two argued that saints throughout the ages have forgiven sinners who have done wrong to them. Even Jesus forgave Judas, who committed the ultimate betrayal. I said that I was no saint and that any resemblance between me and Jesus was cosmetic at best. Amy and Mary were not discouraged, claiming that I had once loved Amy enough to marry her. Amy's devotion to me in the recent past, against all odds, entitled her to help me now. Good God, I'd rather mess with a couple of rabid badgers than Lourdes and Maria. Lourdes explained and laughed at Amy's recent attempt to seduce her as the result of stress, post-traumatic stress disorder due to a sudden turn of events, an attempt to reconnect with a safe and secure past. Lourdes is better than me. I couldn't swallow such nonsense. Maria found Amy a job cleaning houses. The farthest place I could take Amy was the mother-in-law apartment above my garage that Lourdes had arranged for Amy to live in. Amy paid a paltry rent, which helped us a lot. Lourdes and Amy would sometimes sit on our porch and talk together. I tried to avoid Amy at all costs. Who wants to reminisce about a train wreck? Lourdes said Amy only worked and went to church, never leaving the apartment in the garage. I had one warm place I wanted to send Amy, but I kept it to myself, saying it under my breath a few times. Truth be told, I have to admit that Amy never hit on me or proposed to me again. After a few months, things finally settled down. I was climbing the stairs to the porch, returning from my flights. Lourdes was standing on the porch talking to an older woman with silver hair who seemed vaguely familiar. I held out my hand to introduce myself when the silver-haired woman hugged me tightly. Kevin, you remember Mrs. Talon, Lourdes said, from the golf course. And then it hit me. It was the wife of the heart attack victim from that day on the golf course. Now I had a name and a face. I let her go get help that day while Jose and I performed CPR on her husband. Come on, exclaimed the silver-haired Mrs. Talon, dragging me into the house. He's been waiting for you all day, and he's as cranky as an old bear. Who's waiting for me? I asked, entering the dining room. The man we'd rescued from the golf course was sitting at my dining room table. The table was piled with official papers. The man was silver-haired, like his wife. He was of medium build and height, and he reeked of authority. There was a cane on the chair. Damn, boy, come here, growled the silver-haired man. I'm Boone Talon, and I've been waiting to meet you for a very long time. The silver-haired Boone Talon raised his cane and tapped it on the chair beside him. Sit your lucky ass down right here. Boone Talon was a man used to having others do his bidding. I sat down next to him. Boone slapped me on the back so hard I almost fell off my chair. Damn, boy. Mind if I call you Kevin? Said Boone Talon without waiting for an answer. I owe you my life. Boone Talon always pays his debts. He picked up a piece of paper from the table and tossed it into my lap. Now listen, Kevin, this is a personal services contract. I have a Learjet 60 airplane, and you will become one of my personal pilots once you get your license on it. The contract is for 15 years with annual raises and bonuses. You can renew it every year. It doesn't matter if I live or die. The only way to screw this up is to crash the damn airplane. If you do that, you're dead, so you don't get paid anyway. Doc says I can't pilot anymore, but I have to be in position. Lear stays here, I'm paging you. Understood? I looked at the paycheck and my eyes popped out. It was stupid money. Money won in the lotto. Mr. Talon, I began. That's very generous, but that Kevin. Silver-haired Boone Talon interrupted me. You mean my life isn't worth a few measly bucks? The damn insurance company should pay you that much in thanks for saving my sorry ass that day on the golf course. By saving my life, they made those bastards at the insurance company not pay my policy. I was at a loss for words, but energetic silver-haired Boone Talon was not. Next, Kevin, here's this stack of papers. It's the deeds to this house, showing it's fully paid for. Think of it as a signing bonus. I can't have my pilots worrying about some damn mortgage when they're flying my ass. I want them completely focused in the cockpit. There's still a title on the new F-250 Power Stroke pickup. You can get it at the dealer tomorrow. When I call, I don't want you waiting at some damn bus stop. Got it. Boone Talon's gray hair ruffled slightly as he tapped his cane on the table before continuing. That shit with those cowards at the Nine Rivers Country Club. Trying to charge you $14 million for messing up the weed by taking me to the hospital? Forget it. I got more lawyers in the phone book than the whole city. I got my New York profiteers on those Nine River fools. The greedy assholes at Nine Rivers were trying to make a profit. Collecting insurance money for the damage, and you too. The a-holes at Nine Rivers Place should send you a letter of apology this week, along with a paid-up full membership. Now you, young lady, silver-haired Boone Talon pointed his cane at Lords. We need to get you a nursing license. I have 2 instructors from the Kaplan Testing Center who live in a hotel downtown. They will be your personal tutors. I want you to pass this test in 90 days. After that, All Saints Hospital will hire you to work in pediatrics and cardiology. After a year, you'll be in training to be my flying nurse to please the damn insurance assholes. In that mass of paperwork on your desk, there's a contract for you too. Your student loan debts are now a thing of the past. They're paid in full. Besides, I do a lot of flying on my airplane with the kids, so you'll do well in school. Lords jumped up and gave Boone Talon a big hug. Careful, honey, Boone Talon teased Lords. If a young babe touches me like that, it'll drive my pace setter into a frenzy. Mr. Talon, I turned to our silver-haired benefactor. I don't mean to show a gift horse in the teeth, but Jose, my chief mechanic. Boone Talon interrupted me. That Cuban guy with the stubborn Latin wife Maria? Boone Talon grinned. I'll cover for him. Jose is going to bombardier Lear to get qualified on a Lear 65 series airplane. That airplane is in service with your old airline. Jose is going to be in charge and will get a big pay raise. I couldn't get Jose or his wife Maria to take a dime. It took me days to find all the universities his brood is attending. All their children's tuition is fully paid for, as is housing, books, and any loans and fees. I'd rather mess around with the IRS than deal with that wife of his, Maria, again. Her cleaning company is about to have a big contract increase. Just don't tell her anything. Bill Talon rose from his chair with the help of his silver cane. Now, before I go, one last thing. You two, carry your bodies to the preacher, the priest, the justice of the peace, the rabbi, the imam, whatever. I don't like my employees living in sin. Next chapter. Lords and I did get married. I wanted a small and simple wedding. Lords, Maria, and the rest of the Latina women were on top of it. They informed me that my participation was for Jose and I to pick up our tuxedos and show up at the church on the appointed day and hour. It was a grand event at the Nine Rivers Country Club. Boone Talon, our wealthy benefactor with whom we had suffered a heart attack on the golf course, loved a good party. He insisted on paying for the entire event, including a cruise for the newlyweds, a wedding gift, as Boone Talon called it. Amy was there. She has gotten stronger, but she still needs a cane to get around. Because of her short-term memory problems, she seems a little scattered at times. Routines and a house cleaning schedule help her stay on track. Amy still rents out our small apartment above the garage. I treat Amy politely but warily, like a dog that once bit you. Sometimes Amy goes out with a guy who is part of one of the cleaning crews. They met at church, and I wish them luck. My new job has combined two of my loves, Lourdes and flying. Lourdes sends Amy postcards from wherever we fly to, no matter how big or small the place is. Amy and Lourdes still sit on the porch in the evenings while Lourdes discusses with Amy every detail of the place the postcard is being sent to. However, that will soon stop as Lourdes will have to give up flying for a while. The good news is that I'm going to be a proud papa. I will soon have 3 loves. The end. Thanks for watching. I hope you enjoyed it, so subscribe to my channel and watch the next video. It was cool at night, refreshingly cool, cool in the canyon. And it's also dark, almost pitch black, no lights from visible buildings. I can hear the sounds of the night. The babbling of the river, the distant sounds of cars off the highway, and other less discernible sounds. Nocturnal animals stealthily stalking their prey. It seems that today I too fall into that category. Dressed in dark clothes, I too am waiting for my prey. Strangely enough, I am overwhelmed by a feeling of quiet anger. Anger and revenge. I met Marshall Pheasant at a construction site a few years ago. I was hired to do landscaping and exterior living spaces in a new development in Forest Meadow just west of town. The entire Forest Meadow development was a magnet for Californians fleeing the collapsing state with fists full of valuable real estate. They were moving to Central Oregon. Central Oregon has the perfect climate. It doesn't rain much, but there is enough precipitation to give the mountains plenty of snow for skiers in the winter. Nearly 300 days of the year are sunny. The cold winters provide a nice change of seasons. It's not unusual to be sitting in the sun one day and snowing the next. The recreation here is superb. Powder snow for skiers, rivers, lakes, and hiking throughout the area are great for all types of outdoor recreation. There are negative sides to this migration. The main ones are rising real estate prices and Californians. I have noticed that drivers have become much ruder in a hurry. There has been a general arrogance that was rare 5-10 years ago. Now it's here to stay. The good news is that they have the money and want everything built. To me, that outweighs the negative byproducts. When I first met Marshall, I was 28. He must have been about 10 years older. A big, charismatic guy, a little loud and generally in a good mood. On this day, he wasn't in the best of moods. He was yelling at the Finnish carpenter. I noticed the sloppy work when I was finishing the deck, but I didn't say anything. "This is a high-end house," Marshall shouted. "How the hell do you find this quality of work acceptable?" he continued. They went outside to my area so the carpenter could smoke. I heard the whole thing. "What are you waiting for, boy?" the carpenter replied between puffs. "This material is crap. You'll have to redo all the corners." "And it's on you! I'm not paying for the remodeling work you screwed up," growled a blushing Marshall. "To hell with it," the carpenter spat out. "I quit." He grabbed his tools and left. "Damn it," Marshall grumbled to himself. "Now what?" Then he looked at me. Then he looked at my work. All the corners were square and the spacing was just right. I'm a bit of a perfectionist, and this open living space looked great, I have to say. At this point, we started talking. He asked if I could finish the kitchen. We inspected it and familiarized ourselves with the project. Marshall pointed out places that needed fixing because of sloppy work. I saw another half-dozen places that needed help too. He asked how long it would take me to finish the job. "It's estimated that I'll have 30 hours to get it right," I told Marshall. He stopped rubbing the back of his head for a moment, and I realized he was mentally calculating his blow-by-blow total. "I pay $40 an hour and you have 25 hours to get everything done," he told me. "No thanks," I said, and gathering my tools, headed for the trailer. Wait, he called out to me. "Okay, you have 30 hours. Since this is our first job together," I said, "I'll give you my discounted rate of $60 an hour," I told him. Eventually, we agreed on 30 hours at $50 an hour. I told him I would start tomorrow. I also gave him a list of materials I needed in the morning. When we shook hands, he said, "Boy, you didn't even tell me your name," he said. "Kevin Cotton," I told him. "I'm Marshall Pheasant," he told me. "Yeah, I know. That's how we met." That first year, I was a contract laborer for Pheasant Construction. I still did some work on my own, but not as much. Marshall kept me energized. At the end of that first year, I realized something. I was making good money, there was plenty of work, but I wasn't growing my business. In a small construction business, the best way to build your brand is through word-of-mouth reputation. You do something good for someone and they tell their neighbor about it. The neighbor tells someone else. And your reputation grows. And with it, your business. I didn't get any of that. For clients, I was an employee of Pheasant Construction. The brand that was created through my work was Pheasant Construction. I called Marshall and explained my situation. Over the past year, we'd become friends. If not friends, then certainly buddies. I'd met his wife, Belinda, and I'd been to his house and sometimes had a beer after work. I told him I needed to cut my hours at Pheasant Construction. I need to build my own business, I told him. I like working for you, Marshall, but I need to think about my future. I could see that this shocked Marshall a little. He asked me not to make any final decisions yet. He asked me to meet him tomorrow after work at the office. The next evening at the office, I met Marshall and his older sister, Claudia Fazant Brown. I didn't know her well. She rarely spoke to me. Claudia was in finance at Pheasant Construction. She did the bookkeeping, paid the bills, collected the money, and made payroll. Marshall asked me with great officialism to sit down. He and Claudia had a proposition for me. Kevin, we want you to become a partner in Pheasant Construction, Marshall explained with a wide grin. I was a little puzzled by all of this. Partner? I asked. Yes, Claudia has all the details, he said. She can tell you the basics, and then we'll have our attorney take care of all the legal details. What do you say? He reached across the table to shake my hand and grinned broadly again. The basis was this. Marshall owned 60% of the business, Claudia owned 20%, and I owned the remaining 20%. The following Friday, we all met at the lawyer's office, and he reviewed the partnership agreement. I didn't understand everything. There were clauses about changing partnership interests, valuation depending on the business, annual meetings, subordinated loans, dividend distributions, and many other details. After a while, I didn't even try to figure it out. I just signed where I was told. During the whole process, I got the distinct impression that Claudia was angry about something. This anger seemed to be directed at me. I barely knew this woman. What could I do to her? At Pheasant Construction, a clear division of responsibilities quickly emerged. Claudia handled the accounting side of the business. I managed the field projects, often working on them myself. Marshall was in charge. He sold the work, met with vendors, communicated with developers, and built our brand. He was the face of the company. The red pheasant logo was clearly visible on all of our vehicles. They were easy to recognize. They were our brand. Thanks to my work and Marshall's guidance, our business grew. Although some of the work was done by subcontractors, I hired a full-time employee to help me. My coworker was a young man I had worked with before. His name was Angel Menendez. Angel was a hard worker, a quick learner, and rarely talked. I learned two things about him. 1. He was married, had 2 young children, and was fiercely devoted to his family. 2. He was also devoted to me. Business was great. With the influx of Californians and others, our business grew. We were known as a high-quality contractor. We were able to make a profit on our work, and we shared the profits as partners. Our brand was growing and we were making money. My life has been great professionally, but in my early 30s I was single. Central Oregon had a lot of young, attractive women. There was a real bar scene downtown. I've been to places like that a few times. It was fun, but not really my style. I preferred to lead an active lifestyle. When I wasn't doing things in the wilderness, I was working on a small pre-war house I bought in an old neighborhood near downtown. I preferred to barbecue with friends in the backyard rather than go to the fancy bars in town. The problem was that with this lifestyle, it was hard to meet many people. Part of my workday involved picking up materials from various suppliers. Sometimes I had to pick up supplies from the big home improvement store in town. There, I happened to notice a pretty, petite, dark-haired girl working in the paint department. Every time I went there, I tried to find an excuse to flirt with her in color. I learned that her name was Tracy and that she had been working at the home center for almost a year now. I also learned that she occasionally moonlights hanging wallpaper. I told her that I could use her for one of our jobs if she was interested. She said she was interested. Another thing I noticed was the lack of wedding or engagement rings. Within a few weeks, we had become friends and chatted regularly. One day as we chatted, a large, dark-haired supervisor scolded her for not paying attention to a customer. He cast a glance at me as he walked down the aisles. Tracy seemed a little intimidated by the guy. After the client left, I asked her, "Who was that guy?" This is Chad. He's the coordinator for my department. Saying that, she looked around to make sure he wasn't beside her. Chad gets mad if I don't do what he wants, she said. I noticed her blush slightly after saying that. I wondered what he wanted from her. Tracy was a little cutie. She had a sort of teenage girl innocence about her. She also had a youthful, girlish voice. Was this guy really trying to get her attention? There he is, she said and quickly stepped aside. I'm getting off in 15 minutes. I don't want him to make me work a long shift, she said, giving me a quick, nervous smile. As I was leaving, I thought, what the hell? I'll ask her to go out to eat with me. She could always say no. It's no big deal. I retreated to the back of the store where the employee entrance is. About 20 minutes later, I saw her exit, walking briskly toward a group of parked cars. I stalked over to her and was about to call her name when Chad, the bulky store coordinator, ran up and grabbed her by the shoulder, turning the diminutive Tracy around. I couldn't make out what he was saying, but I could see it was a big, sloppy asshole trying to bully an innocent girl. When I showed up, she shook her head, saying no. Is everything okay here? I asked calmly, looking at Tracy. It's none of your business, buddy, exclaimed Chad. I looked at Tracy, and she looked scared. Are you okay? I asked Tracy. She looked fearfully at Chad and at me. She opened her mouth to speak, but no words came out. I wasn't paying attention to Chad. Suddenly, he grabs my shoulder as if to turn me away from Tracy. So here are some physical stats. By my estimate, Chad is about 6'3", 250 fairly soft pounds. One of those guys who is used to getting his way just by virtue of his scrappy physical size. On the other hand, I am 6 feet tall and weigh 180 pounds. I have to say that's a pretty solid 180 pounds. And when the asshole grabs my shoulder, I jerk my hand away, elbowing him on the forearm, still looking only at Tracy. The shrug was pure instinct. By the time I turned to look at Chad, his face had turned red, and he was angry. The blow was so slow and weak that I barely had time to dodge it. My straight right to his soft gut doubled him over. I put my hand on Tracy's shoulder and pulled away. The last time I saw Chad, he was on his knees screaming about Tracy losing her job and me being charged with assault. Luckily, I noticed a security camera almost directly above us. Since he grabbed Tracy and attacked me first, none of his threats bothered me. Several things happened in a short period of time. 1. Tracy was not fired. 2. She quit and found a better job. I helped her. 3. She focused more on her business, Tracy's wallscaping. I helped here too. 4. We became a couple. In those first few weeks, I learned a lot about Tracy. Her full name is Tracy Marie Talcott. She is an only child and was raised mostly without a father. Her mom lives in Prairie View, a desert town about an hour away. Her mom is a smoker living on the edge of poverty. All of their closeness is due to the fact that they are each other's only family. They have no common interests or special affection. We were married in a small ceremony. Her mom, my family, Marshall and Belinda Pheasant, and a few others attended, and I invited Angel and Enos Menendez. Angel and I worked together every day, and a strong friendship developed between us. Life was good. Tracy and I grew close. She was very loving in every way. I taught her about outdoor recreation, fishing, hiking, mountain biking, and other fun activities we could get from living in Central Oregon. As we grew together, I learned other things about Tracy. To my surprise, she was more attracted to the nightlife downtown than I was. Every once in a while, we would stroll around town to go to a restaurant or meet friends at a bar. Tracy's eyes would light up and she always wanted to stay there as long as possible. It was even nice at first. I learned a few more things about Tracy. She was very neat and tidy in the kitchen, but her clothes were a mess in her closet and dresser. She was constantly losing her keys, her phone, her sunglasses, but would only find them a few days later. Pheasant Construction has been a thriving company. We had plenty of work and became known as high-quality builders and remodelers. Angel's carpentry skills were improving too. I was able to leave him on the job without worry. My day started with early Angel training. I would head out to one of our subcontracting crews and guide them through the process. Then I would head out to a high-precision custom job. That fall, we had a very interesting custom project in the expensive Aspen Glen neighborhood. The lot had a small arroyo or depression almost in the center of where the house would ideally stand. I suggested to the owners that they cantilever the house over the depression and let a dry creek bed run under the house. They liked the idea. Essentially, I was building a wooden bridge over an arroyo on which a house would stand. The idea was ambitious, and I had to do some research on building a bridge-like structure. Some structural design was included in the plan. Angel and I worked exclusively on it. It turned out very nicely. The home was featured in a regional consumer magazine. Pheasant Construction was named one of the most advanced and innovative builders in the Pacific Northwest. Of course, Marshall was in his element, talking about how we love pushing boundaries, creating environments, merging with nature, etc. It didn't bother me that Marshall was taking credit for Angel and my skill. I got a nice bonus, and I made sure that a good portion of my bonus went to Angel. The demand for our services increased. We were able to raise our prices, and Angel and I received bonuses for every job we did. We were also able to choose which jobs to take on. In the fall of that year, I was facing an interior remodel of an office in a large house on a piece of land west of town. It was a high-precision job with high expectations. I worked on it alone. The client's name was Preston Balfour. Balfour made his money in real estate all over the West. He had lived in Central Oregon for almost 20 years, and his home was a huge ranch west of town. He wanted a mahogany-paneled study with built-in bookcases. You can imagine drinking fine cigars and brandy in such a room. Marshall told me we would make the maximum amount of money on it, but the client was very demanding. Preston liked me for some reason, and we had a drink together at the end of each day. One night he asked me some questions about my life plans and whether I had the courage to take risks. I told him I had a plan. I just hadn't worked out all the details. I don't want to do manual labor at 50, I told him. I'd like to get land outside of town where I could build a store and work on things whenever I want. He looked at me with a wide grin on his face, nodding his head and just looking at me. What? I asked. I had no idea where this was going. Son, today may be your lucky day, he told me. Preston told us that he owned several thousand acres of land on which the house we were in stood. He was on the verge of getting a county permit to build on it. His neighbor to the north, Abner Flint, was thinking of selling his 80-acre lot on which stood a small house. Are you going to buy it? I asked Preston. That old asshole hates me. He'll never sell to me. He thinks I shot one of his dogs that got on my property. He continued. Ever since then, he's been blowing me off every time he sees me. Why does he think you shot his dog? I asked. Because I did, he replied. So there you have it. That 80 acres is a gold mine once the zoning passes. Flint doesn't know anything about it yet. Son, somebody's going to make a lot of money off that land. Why not you? We discussed it, and Preston said I needed $600,000. I had an idea of how I could raise that money. I remembered that my law partnership had an equity loan option. I thanked Preston and told him I needed to think about all of this. He nodded and told me to think fast. Old man Flint's land would soon increase in value eightfold. That night I went home and told Tracy about my conversation with Preston Balfour. I'm not sure she caught all the details, but she must have sensed my excitement, and it excited her too. She also caught the idea of getting rich. The next day, I called Marshall and told him I had something I wanted to discuss with him over lunch. We agreed to meet at a cafe near the office. I considered asking Marshall to join me in the venture to purchase the Flint land. As I pondered this option, I came to a certain conclusion. Although I liked Marshall and we were partners, I couldn't say I trusted him completely. Over lunch, I told him I would like to inquire about the possibility of taking out a loan against my equity with Pheasant Construction. How much are we talking about, Kevin? Asked Marshall. Well, I was wondering if I could get $600,000, I told him. Marshall almost choked on his food. $600K, he hissed. Kevin, that's a hell of a lot of money. What are you going to do with $600K? That's where it got tricky. I didn't want to tell him what I was doing, but I didn't want to lie to him either. I was kind of mixing the truth with a lie. There's a piece of land I want to buy and eventually build a house and a store on it. It was all true. I just left out the building part. I don't know, Kevin. It seems like a lot of money for our business. I need to talk to Claudia about all of this. He wasn't optimistic. We ended up talking about business for a while. Out of the blue, Marshall invited Tracy and me to spend a week in Cabo with him and Belinda the first week of January. They had a villa for rent. We just had to pay for the flight. I told him I'd talk to Tracy. As we left, Marshall patted me on the shoulder and said with a sincere look that he would consider a loan, but not to get my hopes up. That night I was excited about the trip, but sad about the loan. Tracy was excited about the trip to Cabo and not as upset about the loan. She was already planning what she would take with her to Mexico. The next day in the middle of the afternoon, Marshall called me and asked me to come to the office after work and meet with him and Claudia. It was supposed to be about the loan. I arrived a little after 17 o'clock. Claudia greeted me and was much friendlier than usual. I wasn't often in the office, but every time I had interacted with Claudia, it had been businesslike at best, and often downright hostile. Tonight was different. How was your day, Kevin? She asked, almost affectionately. Not bad, I said, and started telling her about our projects. She nodded and smiled at me, but I was sure she wasn't paying much attention to my words. At that moment, Marshall picked up the phone, and we all walked into his office. There was a wide, charismatic grin on Marshall's face and a folder of documents on his desk. Kevin, Marshall began, Claudia and I have discussed your loan request. We take these matters very seriously. The happiness of our employees, I meant partners, is very important. I want Pheasant Construction to be more than just a workplace. I want it to be a family atmosphere. It sounded positive, almost too good to be true. Your equity is 20%. Our bank and CPA valued the business at $2.4 million. Your equity of 100% is $480,000. That's the maximum we can give you. Then he opened a file folder and handed me a check for $490,000. I've included a year-end bonus for you in the amount of $10,000. I also have a check for $5,000 for Angel. I was hoping you would present it to him. And now Claudia has brought us all some papers to sign. That was the end of the matter. I was very excited and nervous. Everything seemed to be going too smoothly. I signed a few different documents. To be honest, I didn't understand much of what I was signing. I guess I just trusted Marshall and Claudia. Marshall invited me to have dinner with him and Claudia, but I declined. Have you bought your tickets to Cabo yet? Asked Marshall as we parted ways. I told him we'd have it done by the end of the week. I was in a good mood. My financial dreams were getting closer and closer. I loved Tracy and was making her happy with this trip. And the work was great. I loved what I was doing. I was glad Angel was doing so well, and I was feeling good about my business relationship with Pheasant Construction. What could have gone wrong? The day after working on the Preston study, we had a drink. I told him I had $490,000. Son, you're going to need all that $600,000. Old man Flint ain't that smart, but he's stubborn. You're going to need another $110,000, he told me. For a while, we sat in silence. What's your equity on a house in the city? He asked. I hadn't thought of that. I originally bought the house for $175,000. With the improvements I made, it should have been worth over $300,000. You're right, I said. I can borrow against it and get $110,000. Or sell it and live in Flint's house while you build your store. Whatever he did, Abner Flint kept his property in good order. Never been there, but I'll bet the house is in good condition, added Preston. I wasn't thinking about living there. My goal of owning land was suddenly fast approaching. But would Tracy like it here? I know she likes the hustle and bustle of the city, but I believe she shares my dream of land and financial independence. At least I hope so. Over the next few weeks, I contacted Abner Flint and made him a full price offer. I put my house on the market, and within 24 hours, I received several offers, all above the asking price. Tracy seemed excited, but I noticed some hesitation. All this time, I had kept my personal business separate from Pheasant Construction. During this process, I continued to seek Preston's advice. He proved to be extremely helpful. With the help of his attorney, I formalized the purchase of the land as an LLC of which I was 100% owner. I did not understand all the details of my loan through Pheasant Construction. I told Preston that I wanted to make sure that Marshall could not somehow get his hands on my land. Preston assured me that no one but me had rights to the land until I decided to sell it. On New Year's Eve, we closed on a real estate sale in Flint. Abner said he would be gone by January 2nd. Our flight to Cabo was leaving on January 5th, and we needed to vacate our house in the city by February 5th. Everything worked out just fine. On January 3rd, Tracy and I drove to the allotment. It was about 15 miles out of town. As we drove, all Tracy talked about was the trip to Mexico. She had only flown once before. We had to get an expedited passport for Tracy. She was very excited and nervous. It was an unseasonably warm January day in Central Oregon. First, we looked around the house. Preston was right. It was neat as a pin, but very dated. I enthusiastically started talking about how we could renovate it. Tracy only nodded her head, but not as enthusiastically as I was. Tropical Mexico is an overload of the senses. The warm to hot weather and gorgeous blue ocean water was breathtaking. For Tracy, who rarely traveled outside of our county, Cabo was an exotic wonderland. The few times she had been to the Oregon coast, the water temperature had never exceeded 50 degrees. The 80-degree Mexican Ocean was intoxicating. The oceanfront villa was awesome, too. We had a private balcony in the bedroom, and a hot tub in the bathroom. The living room had a large sun terrace overlooking the ocean. Belinda was usually on this terrace doing her sunbathing. In the mornings, we took long walks on the beach or explored downtown Cabo. One morning, we took a water cab to Lover's Beach. We saw the rugged side of the Pacific Ocean. We had been warned about the dangers of this part of the beach. About half the time, we were joined by Marshall and Belinda, but we realized we could each go about our own business. Usually by mid-afternoon, the drinks started flowing. It was paradise. Tropical drinks, beautiful ocean views, and wonderful warm weather. No stress. We all became comfortable with each other. We had spent time with Marshall and Belinda before, but when you spend a long time with someone, you can become more used to and comfortable around them. In Belinda's case, we found that she became very comfortable. Belinda was in her early 30s, I realized. Attractive and slender. She didn't have the thinness that Tracy had, but she was curvy. One evening, after a long day of beach, sun, and fun, we all probably had too much to drink. We were cooking dinner at the villa and everyone was in a good mood. Belinda asked Marshall to open a jar of salsa that was stuck. He couldn't open it. Then she asked me. I opened it. A tipsy Belinda hugged me and kissed me, thankfully on the cheek. Giggling, she staggered into the kitchen. Marshall laughed at the whole scene and then I looked at Tracy. She was staring at me and also at Belinda. I went over to hug her, but she pulled away. All that night she was silent. I tried to pay more attention to her. Tracy, what's wrong? I asked later that night. She just shrugged and released herself from my embrace. Do you want to take a walk on the beach? I asked. It was something she liked to do when the sun was setting. She didn't answer. How about we go to bed a little early, if you know what I mean? I asked with a chuckle. No thanks, she said. I'm sure I'll be a disappointment compared to Miss Titsy, she continued. Then she walked away. What have I done? The rest of the vacation went great, and it wasn't long before we were on our way home. Back in Central Oregon, we had the added burden of packing up a house we sold in town and moving to a new place out of town in addition to our regular work. I was excited about the move, but Tracy, who had returned from vacation, looked a little depressed. We moved into the old Flint house and had some things to do. I told Tracy that we would build a new house in the next few years. The old Flint house was temporary. There were times when our goals and dreams aligned, but there were also times when Tracy said something that made me think that maybe they weren't quite the same. Suddenly, we were both busy working. As well as working part-time at Venza Paint and Tile, Tracy was also recruiting clients for Tracy's wallscaping. She was painting and wallpapering and was also quite good at Venetian plastering. Pheasant construction was thriving. By March, we were busy for most of the year, and we were picking and choosing jobs. Angel and I were mostly doing custom finishes on high-end homes. Marshall and I were discussing the possibility of hiring an in-house designer. Marshall also wanted to hire more production staff. There was still something wrong with Tracy. The transition must have taken her a while. I didn't see the happy, fun-loving Tracy as often as I used to. I kept reminding her of our long-term goals. One day in mid-spring, Tracy called me at work and asked if we could meet in town at Blacksmith's restaurant for dinner one evening. What's the occasion? I asked her. Blacksmith's was a very nice restaurant. That's on me, she said. I have something I want to talk to you about. Don't worry, I think you'll like it. But I want to talk to you about it over dinner. Good, I said. Very mysterious. She laughed and hung up the phone. That night we had a delicious dinner at Blacksmith's. All through dinner, I tried to get her to tell me what she wanted to talk to me about. Finally, as we were finishing up, she spoke nervously. Kevin, she began. You know I've always wished I had bigger breasts. I know, Tracy, but it doesn't matter to me. I like you just the way you are, I told her. You say that because you love me, but I think you'd like it. She said, I didn't say anything. I wanted to see where this was going. Yesterday I met with a plastic surgeon, Dr. Daniel St. Pierre. Their clinic is right next to Franciscan Hospital. He said I was the perfect candidate, she said excitedly. The procedure will cost $8,000. I saved that money on my business. There are all kinds of implants, she told me. She then went on to talk about gel, silicone, and saline, the different sizes of cubes, what size would be too big, recovery time, etc. I didn't care at all. If it would make Tracy happy, I guess I'd be all for it. But I couldn't help but wonder if this whole trip to Mexico had caused her to think that way. She had surgery. It was outpatient. Dr. St. Pierre said she did wonderfully and that everything went well. For several days she was bandaged up. Tracy took a week off work to recover. For a few weeks she was not allowed to bend over or lift anything. Finally, one Saturday morning I came back from working outside. I walked into the house and there stood Tracy with her new update. I was a little surprised. She looked good. She kept looking at me. She was proud of her new body and sought my approval of her improved appearance. "Wow," I said, still in mild shock. "Tracy, honey, you look great." She did look good, just in a different way. I guess it takes some getting used to. If Tracy was happy and it helped her come out of her dormant state, then I was happy too. Life went on. Working at Pheasant Construction was good, but so stressful. Angel and I worked hard and built beautiful structures. And we were making good money. At first, Tracy seemed happier and more confident. Her business was growing too. One night we were meeting downtown for dinner, and I was running late. I told her to get a drink and wait at the bar, and I'd be there soon. The bar faced the sidewalk, and as I walked to the door through the windows, I saw Tracy sitting behind the counter. Some handsome guy was chatting with her. No surprise, she looked good. What was surprising was the way she was playing along, almost flirting back at him. I walked in, pushed the asshole aside, and kissed her. Tracy tried to introduce me to Jackson, and I just nodded as we headed to our table for dinner. I was glad that Tracy was becoming more confident. I, on the other hand, needed to think about flirting some more. Tracy started asking me about our new house. She also started asking me about the big project that Preston had originally talked to me about. Honestly, I had been so busy at Pheasant Construction that I hadn't even thought about it. The following Sunday morning, I met with Preston Balfour for coffee. We talked about a lot of things. With Preston, he steers the conversation in the direction he wants it to go, and you just participate in the conversation. I ended up asking him about the zoning changes in the county. "Son, we have some good news and some not so good news," he said. "The good news is that all the commissioners like the idea. We'll increase the county's tax base. The bad news is one of the commissioners is resigning mid-term for health reasons. The interim commissioner is a tree advocate, Margaret Plum. She was something of a hippie in her youth. She might not be as friendly to progress. We'll have to wait and see." It wasn't exactly good news. Life went on. Work was good. We were busy, making money and building some really nice things. Other parts of my life were not so positive. Obviously, the uncertain news about my land and county zoning was not what I wanted. I wanted to start building our new house, but even with the money I was making at Pheasant, I still didn't have the money to build the house I wanted for Tracy and me. Come to think of it, it looks like we were supposed to split the dividend. I'll have to remember to talk to Marshall or Claudia about the status of this issue. And then Tracy showed up. We didn't seem to be having as good a time as we used to. She was doing well, and she was becoming more and more confident. I wanted to go camping, fishing, mountain biking, or just spend time together at home. She seemed happiest when she dressed up and we went out to restaurants downtown. She had always looked good, and now, with her new physique, she was attracting a lot of attention. While I didn't doubt her fidelity, I noticed that she seemed to enjoy the attention of other men. In early September, we hired a new staff member at Pheasant. The new employee is Iris Pheasant Brown. She is Claudia's daughter and a recent college graduate. Iris has a Bachelor of Science degree in architecture. I later learned that she plans to return to college in a few years to get her master's degree. Claudia introduced us at our monthly meeting. "Kevin, I'd like you to meet my daughter Iris Pheasant Brown." At these words, she almost bowed as if I were meeting royalty. "Hi, I'm Iris Brown." She smiled and looked me straight in the eye, extending her hand for a firm shake. So far she didn't look like her mother, and that's a good thing. We went about our usual business. We worked on the schedule a bit and talked about some upcoming construction. As I got up to leave, Claudia approached me. "Kevin, just because Iris is on staff doesn't mean you have to call for every minor issue," she said imperiously. "Mother of God!" exclaimed Iris. Iris then looked at me. "Kevin, if there is anything I can do to help, please call me anytime. I have seen some of your work and you are really good. That's one of the main reasons why I'm glad to work here," she told me. "Well, I just know you'll be busy." Claudia trailed off. Iris ignored her mother, shook my hand and said, "It's nice to meet Kevin." That was the end of it. We were still busy and the workload continued to be stressful. Angel and I were focused on quality. Marshall was focused on volume and the money it brought in. There were conflicts because of that. It was also putting stress on my relationship with Tracy and me. She was busy with her business too, but not as much as I was. I know she didn't like being home alone on weekends while I worked. In mid-October, I planned a day off. The weather this time of year can be unpredictable. It can be 70 degrees or cold. This Saturday was beautiful. Tracy was in a good mood, and so was I. Mid-morning, she came up behind me and put a blindfold on my eyes. "Leave the blindfold on, count to 200, and then find me," she whispered in my ear. I smiled as I heard the door close. I was almost to 200 when the phone rang. A customer with a problem. It was quite minor, but some of these people with money were so self-absorbed they thought the world revolved around them. He kept me on the phone for a while. After no more than 10 or 15 minutes, I calmed him down and went out. Just as I was about to go looking for Tracy, she burst into the house, crying and angry. She looked at me with eyes full of tears and locked herself in her bedroom. I was at a loss. What had I done? I was a few minutes late, but why all the tears and anger? I rang the doorbell, but there was no answer. Finally, 2 hours later, she came out, a little dressed up for Saturday. "Tracy, honey, I'm so sorry," I said. "I promised you I wouldn't work, and I got a call from some asshole client about something trivial. I promised not to work all weekend anymore." "I understand," she said. "It's okay, I overreacted." And she gave me a brief smile. I took her in my arms and hugged her. She hugged me back, perhaps with less enthusiasm. "What would you like to do this afternoon?" I asked, hoping I could salvage the weekend. "I have some errands to run in town," she said. "I won't be long." When I asked if she wanted to keep me company, she gladly but firmly declined. There was always something to do on the property, and I immersed myself in housework. Suddenly, I realized that it was late evening. It wasn't dark yet, but it was getting there. I hadn't noticed Tracy come home and hadn't heard from her. Checking the time, I saw it was 4:45. I called her, but the call went straight to voicemail. I texted her, "Hey, where are you? What are your dinner plans?" By my count, she'd been gone almost 6 hours. That's a hell of a lot to do. I kept checking for a response, but no calls or messages. I went back to the house, showered and changed my clothes, but still nothing. Now I was starting to worry that something might have happened to her. Once you run a thought like that in your brain, your imagination can run wild. I began to worry even more. After another attempt to contact her by phone failed, I decided to drive toward town and see if there had been an accident. By this time, it was already 7 o'clock and it was getting dark outside. I took the highway into town, moving slowly so I could at least make out something on the side of the road. I got to town, but I didn't find anything. I sat down for a moment to think about where she might be. As I pondered this, I realized that Tracy really didn't have any friends that I knew of. There was no one I could imagine her with. If I hadn't been so disturbed, I might have reflected on the sadness a little deeper. Finally, I drove back to our house, checking for any signs on the road along the way. I thought about calling the police, but realized she'd have to be gone a lot longer than she was now to get any results. I decided to have dinner. I cooked enough for a plate for Tracy. After that, I sipped my beer and waited. I must have fallen asleep because the next thing I knew, Tracy walked through the front door. Coming out of my evening nap, I lost my bearings for a moment. "Hi, honey, I'm home," she giggled. "What's wrong?" I asked. "I was worried about you. Are you okay?" "You didn't get my messages?" I continued. "I'm sorry, honey," and she kissed my cheek. The faint odor of alcohol? Time got away from me. She explained with a wide smile on her face. "I've been watching her." A little unsure of her gait. Her eyes were a little glassy. It looked like she was on the road to drunkenness. "Have you been drinking?" I asked. "A little," she giggled. "I had some wine at dinner." "Tracy," I said firmly, not quite yelling, "I was worried about you. After I hadn't heard from you, I drove down the highway looking for you." "Why do you have to look for me?" she asked with an amused look of bewilderment on her face. "I was fine," she said. I got angry and the conversation went downhill from there. Eventually, I started yelling, and she didn't seem to realize what she had done wrong. She said she was shopping and decided to have dinner at Pizza's, an Italian place in town with a small pickup bar. She said she only had 2 glasses of wine, but I doubt it was that much. Eventually, we just stopped talking to each other. I was angry, and she was angry that I was angry. She didn't understand what was bothering me or why I was angry. Furthermore, I had never seen this kind of behavior on Tracy's part. We ended up having one of those cold wars for married couples for a few days. You know how it is. You gradually start to be more civil to your spouse until you reach a normal level of affection. Despite the normalcy, I saw a side of Tracy that I hadn't encountered before, and I had some concerns. River Ridge was a new luxury development in the northwest part of the city. These were expensive luxury custom homes. Many had views, and the most exclusive ones were right on the river. Pheasant Construction started out doing a lot of work in the area. Our reputation for quality and workmanship became well known. The demand for our services was high, and some of the wealthy clients were willing to pay well for our services, and some were waiting for us to show up. It was early December, and Angel and I were trying to get our latest project in order. The porch roof needed some complicated angles to be joined. I called Iris, and she said she wanted to see it in person, so she came to the job site. She and I looked at the porch, and she brought out the plans. She detailed the roof line, and now I understood how we wanted to build this particular piece. We walked through the house together. Iris is in her early 20s. Tall, about 5 feet tall, with a pleasant appearance. Not too much makeup, but I wouldn't call her earthy. Attractive tomboyish girl? Slender, with slight feminine curves, but she didn't dress in a way that showed off that healthy body. I asked her how she liked working at Pheasant. I love it. I love the challenge of designing luxury custom homes. When I think about the other guys I went to architecture school with designing hospitals and sewage systems, it all seems so boring compared to what I do, she told me. Well, you're good at what you do, and I'm glad you like it here, said I. Thank you. There are only a few things that bother me. The first is my mom, she said. Oh? I questioned, not intending to say too much about her mother. She's so meticulous about everything, getting worked up over the smallest details. And oh my God, she tries so hard to patronize me. I'm not a child, I'm a 26-year-old grown woman, she added. I didn't say anything, but agreed with her comments. And the other thing is Uncle Marsh, she said. I know he's a good businessman and the company is doing well, but for him, profit is all that matters. I believe that if you create good products at a reasonable price, the money will come by itself. I just nodded. I was actually in agreement with what she was saying. Philosophically, we were in complete agreement. It would be nice to have an ally in the company. The next week, Marshall called and invited Tracy and me to return to the villa in Cabo the first week of January. By then, Angel and I would have easily finished the house in River Ridge, and this trip could be the thing that got Tracy and me back on track, and the timing was perfect. When I told Tracy about it, she was beyond thrilled. She hugged me, kissed me, and started talking about buying a new swimsuit. This revitalization in her mood lasted all through the holiday season. It was like we were back to the old days when we were so focused on each other. I decided I needed to take more vacations. The villa was just as we remembered it, and we were very happy to be in tropical Mexico. The weather was warm and beautiful, and we had a wonderful view of the blue ocean from the deck. Tracy was looking forward to wearing her new bathing suits. That first morning, we decided to take a walk on the beach. I hadn't seen any of her new suits, so I was a little shocked when she walked out onto the beach. Tracy, you're almost naked, I told her. You don't like it? She asked with a wait-and-see look on her face. No, honey, you look great, I told her. But I think others will see things in you that only I should see, I continued. I smiled slightly as I said this. I didn't want her to be upset. She looked at me, smiled, and said, That's okay, we're on vacation, I'll wear my raincoat. And we went for a walk. Soon the blanket was removed. I relaxed a little, knowing that we would never see these people again. After a while, the heat made us thirsty, and I asked Tracy if she wanted water or anything else. I walked over to one of the beach huts to get some drinks while Tracy swam in the ocean. When I returned with the drinks, I saw two young guys, fraternity members, standing next to Tracy and talking. These guys were in good shape and probably 6, 7 years younger than Tracy. When I returned, I handed her a can of Coke. The guys were polite and left pretty quickly. When I asked her what was up, she said they were just asking where she was from and how long she had lived here. I can't blame the guys, she looks incredible. What bothered me a little was how she was flirting back at them a little. We spent the afternoon on the sun deck. Marshall seemed to be paying extra attention to Tracy. It bothered me a little that Marshall had seen her like that. I know we were on vacation, and I'd certainly seen his wife topless, but Tracy was my wife, and this was somehow different. I don't know exactly why. Another thing that bothered me was that Marshall continued to pay Tracy extra attention. Tracy seemed to enjoy it, giggling at his comments. I've watched Marshall turn on the charm in business situations when he wants something. He's good at it, and he usually gets his way. I've seen something similar here in Mexico. That night after dinner, Tracy and I sat on the small balcony outside our bedroom and watched the sunset. Despite my concerns about flirting, it had been a good day. Sitting in the chair, Tracy began rubbing my shoulders and neck. After a while, she gently threw a scarf over my eyes and tied it, and I was blindfolded. After 15 pleasant minutes, the blindfold comes off and I catch a glimpse of the scene. Tracy, the palm trees swaying in the tropical evening, and was there movement from Marshall's balcony? At the end of the week, Marshall and I broke protocol and discussed business. We could now in good conscience write off most of the trip. Marshall thinks we need to hire some more carpenters. Kevin, our brand is at its peak right now. Our plans are already scheduled many months in advance. We have verbal commitments for 4 more homes in River Ridge. I'd like to finish all 4 this year, he said. This year, exclaimed I. Angel and I will start Juniper 552 after we get back, and we'll be lucky if we finish another big novel this year. There's no way we can even finish 3. Isn't the one on Canyon custom made? I asked. Yes, the bridge, he said. Kevin, listen, I have a plan. A guy I play golf with, my own brother, is moving to Central Oregon in February. I talked to him on the phone. He's a construction worker. The guy seems to know what he's doing and has a crew. Apparently, he's been building houses in Houston for a long time. Don't worry, you're still in charge. He will report to you. I see you and Angel are taking care of 2 houses, and the new guys are taking care of the other 2. He smiled and patted my shoulder. Great, I thought. We have a high-end brand to protect. And now I'm responsible for these new guys whose skills I have no idea whatsoever. I'm already feeling the stress and the strain. All too soon, we were back in Central Oregon. Tracy seemed to carry Cabo's good mood home into our lives after vacation. It was a positive thing. Angel and I got busy with the house on Juniper Drive in River Ridge. I knew I was going to be busy this year. I promised myself that I would carve out time for Tracy and me in this busy year. The funny thing was that Tracy showed up less often than usual. Every week or 2 she came home in the middle of the evening, after dinner. Even on some weekends, she was gone for long periods of time. When I asked her about it, she said that her business was really picking up. The positive attitude persisted, and that was a good thing. This was the new confident Tracy. One day, Marshall called out of the blue and asked if I could meet him at his office after work. When I pulled up, I heard some voices coming from Marshall's office, and Iris looked at me strangely, rolling her eyes. I walked in. Kevin, glad you could make it, Marshall said enthusiastically. I'd like you to meet our new employees, he continued. Kevin, this is Terry Destry, Junior Messersmith, and Ed Crump. Silently shaking their hands, I looked around the group. Destry looked like a chieftain. Skinny, lupine, skin tight, with a permanent smirk on his face and half-closed eyes. I had a distinct feeling I wasn't going to like this guy. Messersmith weighed 300 pounds, fat but stout with a shaved head. He didn't look particularly intelligent either. Krampus was small and squinted, his eyes dancing. He kept glancing at Destry, assessing his facial expression before reacting to anything. Puppet. I really hope my initial reaction to this group was wrong. Let's have a drink around the corner, get to know each other, and make a tentative plan, said Marshall, and I saw him pat Destry and Crump on the back as we left the office. I wanted to find out how much Destry knew about construction. I asked him about this or that construction technique, and he claimed to know it. To all my questions, he answered briefly and affirmatively. Every now and then I would say something, and Destry and Crump would giggle, as if I were some dumbass who didn't understand their inside joke. At one point, I looked over and saw Marshall talking to Junior about his vision for Pheasant Construction and long-term growth plans, the brand, our goals. Junior was looking at him with a completely blank expression on his face. Marshall might as well have been talking to a stone Buddha. The next day I met Angel, and as soon as we agreed, I went to see how Destry and company were doing. I drove up to their construction site and there was nobody working. Destry and Krampus are smoking and Junior's eating a donut. Is the guy on a break? I ask. I don't have any plans, boss, Destry tells me. You're the project manager, and I expect you to be on the construction site giving us orders, he says with a challenge in his voice and a smirk on his face. I took a long, hard look at him, shook my head, and outlined my schedule for the day. From what he'd told me last night, this assembly shouldn't be a problem for his skills. As soon as they got to work, I went back to Juniper to work with Angel. By the end of the day, I was back at Destry's place of work. They had some skills and had made some progress, but it wasn't the same quality that Angel and I had. I didn't see anything in particular that they were doing wrong. Just some carelessness and underhandedness that I wouldn't do. Now I was used to going to Destry's office first, making sure they had a plan for the day, and then going to Angel's office. By the end of the day, I would map out the next day's plan with Angel. Angel was so good, I almost didn't need to do that. Life with Tracy was good, but changing. As I said, she was more confident and dressed in a way that showed off her body more. Her appetite for the restaurants, bars, and stores in town seemed to have increased. One evening, we met for dinner at Pizza's restaurant. We talked about how our day had gone. I noticed that while I was talking to Tracy, every now and then her eyes would scan the room to see who was here and what she was doing. I felt like I wasn't getting her full attention. We were talking about our new house, and she was asking about land, development, and the neighborhood. I thought I needed to talk to Preston about it again. I told her that I believe we are close to starting construction on the new house. I also told her that Iris was doing the design. As I started to give her some details, she looked at me over her shoulder, and her face lit up with a wide smile. I feel a pat on the back and unmistakably recognize Marshall's greeting. "What a pleasant surprise to meet you both here," he muttered. "Kevin," he greets me with a quick squeeze of his shoulders. "And the lovely Miss Tracy," he says, and puts his arm around her. As they separate, I notice her quickly scrutinizing her cleavage. Since when did these two develop such a friendship? I know we all hung out together in Cabo, but that was almost 3 months ago. They look like old friends or more. And Tracy is just glowing looking at Marshall. "Would you like to join us?" asked Tracy. "Just a minute, I'm meeting some people at the bar." He takes a vacant chair, pulls himself over to Tracy, and starts talking. This goes on for about 15 minutes before he leaves to meet with his people. During this time, I estimate that at least 12 of those minutes were completely focused on Tracy. He told her more than once how beautiful she looked. Each time she smiled broadly in appreciation. There was a strange atmosphere emanating from this whole scene that I didn't like. On the way home, I reminded Tracy that my land deal was not something I wanted Marshall to know about. All the way there, she was uncharacteristically quiet, silently staring out the window into the night. Sunday morning, I went over to Preston's for coffee. He was always happy to see me. I considered Preston a good friend, and he seemed to like me too. From time to time, I asked Preston for advice, and so far he had always been helpful. We talked a little about Pheasant, and I told him about Destry and the Texas crowd. I also told him my thoughts on Marshall. "Son, have you ever thought about going off on your own?" he asked. I told him that up until the last few months, I really enjoyed my job at Pheasant. I told him that Marshall was really good at what he did, and that I thought we were really building something in this business. "I was hoping it would happen," I said. "Once the county approves the development, I'll have enough reserves to start my own business. Build 1 house a year. And focus on building a high-quality product." "Ah, yes. The county." Preston sighed and looked up at the ceiling as if asking for divine help. Margaret Plum, the hippie woman, as we expected, is slowing down the process. The other 2 commissioners are ready to go. Just last week, I submitted a new proposal to them. "What's the new offer?" I asked. "The minimum lot size is 5 acres, he said. "That means there will be fewer houses, less traffic, less pollution, and a smaller carbon footprint. I hope that will be enough to sway Margaret." He told me not to worry about getting a great return on my investment and to be patient. I was pleased with this because, as I said, so far Preston had always given reliable advice. I thanked him, and as I was leaving, I asked him again about my legal defense with the LLC his attorney had set up for me. "Don't worry, son, no one can have this land but you." "Not even your sweet little bride," he told me. I thought about that as I drove home. In midsummer, Angel and I finished the house on Juniper Drive and began construction on another large house in River Ridge. Destry and Company had stalled building the house due to quality issues. The owners were not satisfied with several things about their workmanship. Marshall called and suggested that I send Angel over to help them finish up so we could complete this project. When I told Angel about it, I realized he wasn't thrilled about working with the Destry boys. On the evening of the 3rd day of Angel's work with Destry, Angel called me. "Casey, I don't want to work with these guys anymore," Angel said. I didn't blame him, but I wanted to know why. "How come, Angel?" I asked. "I just don't want to work with them." "I work with you or myself, not with them," he said. I asked him to elaborate, but he didn't want to say anything, so I finally got him to tell me. "They laugh at me, call me names, bad guys. I don't want to leave you, but I don't work with them anymore," Angel told me. "Goddamn assholes!" I saw it happen. I should have thought about it. I felt sorry for Angel. "No, Angel, you're not leaving. You don't have to work with them anymore," I told him. "You're coming back to me starting tomorrow. I'll take care of it." "Gracias, KC," he said to me. The next morning, I arrived at their house early. "Where's Jose?" asked Destry. I didn't say a word, just went nose to nose with him and stared. "If you bloody idiots knew how to build properly, he wouldn't be here," I told Destry firmly, looking him straight in the eye. "Easy, boss. Get out of my space." He said it without a cocky smirk. As the tension was building, Junior came over. I thought about it. I didn't want to mess with that monster. I stepped aside toward the house to reduce the tension a bit. "Just do your job right if you want to keep working here," I said. "Are you threatening us with our jobs, boss?" asked Destry. "Just manage your projects from now on," I said, walking back to my truck. I heard Destry say something, but I wasn't quite sure what it was, and then I heard Krampus start cackling. It sounded like, "You can't even handle your woman." Maybe that's what I heard? That day I thought about Tracy while I was working. She was in a good mood most of the time, but I'm not sure I was the one who put her in a good mood. She was away a lot, sometimes all the way into the evening. Sometimes she'd come home after 9 o'clock at night. When I asked her questions, she gave vague answers. I know she worked hard, just like me. We used to talk about our dreams and goals when we were together. However, lately it seemed like I was doing most of the talking and she was just agreeing with me. It seemed like we were drifting apart. That night I told her all of this without accusation. I got her attention, and over the next few months things went back to normal. We spent more time together, and she was in a good mood most of the time. Far fewer evenings out. We were still a little out of sorts, but I attributed that to our frantic work schedules. I met with Iris several times a month, mostly at our construction site, so she could update me on progress, answer questions, and make sure everything was on track. To supplement her income, Iris told me she works as a bartender at Maxine's, a nice restaurant near the center of town. My uncle doesn't pay that much, but it's even fun. On weekends, I can easily make between $100 and $200 a night. Iris asked me to go with her when she was at Destry's work. "He gives me the creeps," she told me. And that younger one. "He looks at me like he's going to rape me at any moment." She wasn't kidding. One day in early November, as she was leaving our construction site, she asked me a strange question. "Are you and Tracy all right?" she asked. "Yeah, why?" I asked. "Okay," she said. "Forget I asked." And with that, she left. I wonder why she asked. Tracy and I seemed to get along just fine. The pressure to complete these jobs was immense. The pressure came not only from the customers, who had their own deadlines, but also from Marshall. The more production he received, the more money Pheasant Construction made. My pressure was compounded by a desire to create a good product and make sure Pheasant Construction's reputation was not damaged. After all, I was a partner. In late November, I told Tracy that the next month or so would be busier than usual. She took it calmly. The next day, Marshall called and invited us back to Cabo in January. "Marshall, how can you even offer Cabo this year?" I asked him. "We're a few weeks behind, and the homeowners are supposed to move in by mid-January. Kevin, you're the project manager. It's your job to get projects done on time. I plan to go, and I want you and Tracy to go." He spoke very calmly. I was furious. How could he in good conscience take a vacation when I was working 60-plus hours a week? Well, I can't go. Maybe Tracy and I will take a vacation when things are settled. The other thing is that I'm spending so much time fixing your boy Destry's mistakes that it's slowing me down. We're going to have a serious discussion about all of this as soon as I can finish the project. I told him. A few days later, I got a call from Tracy. "Why didn't you tell me we were invited back to Cabo?" she asked. Apparently, she'd run into Marshall somewhere, and he'd said something. "Tracy, that didn't make sense. There's no way I can get away from the job I'm working on right now. Even without a vacation, it's going to take all my time to finish it by the 15th, I told her. And that was the end of it. I knew she was disappointed, but there were no options. Destry and his crew were running out of time on the Canyon Ridge house. I expected Tracy to be upset about Cabo, but at home that evening she was in a great mood. Perhaps she is beginning to realize that in a few months, maybe months but no more than a few years, our life's dream will be fulfilled. Fewer hours, less financial stress, and more time to do the things we want to do. That Saturday, Tracy had planned a date night for us. Dinner in town, followed by a nice evening at home. We had a nice dinner, and as we sipped our wine, Tracy, a little nervously, started talking. "Kevin, honey, I know you're very busy right now and don't have a lot of free time. But you see, the thing is, I'm starting to slow down for winter," she told me. "Okay, I knew all that, but what's the point of all this? And even though you can't go, I bought a ticket for me to Cabo." At those words, she lowered her face and looked up quickly to gauge my reaction. "Are you going without me?" I asked. "It's only for a few days, and I really love being there, in this beautiful villa and in this fantastic weather." "They said it's okay if I come alone," she said. I didn't say a word. Several thoughts ran through my head. The first was Tracy walking around topless when I wasn't around. But what bothered me most was the lack of self-sacrifice on her part. I thought she and I had a dream, a vision of what our lives would be like. To achieve our dreams, we often have to make sacrifices. I worked hard, that was a sacrifice. There was no way I could take a vacation, that was a sacrifice. I had to deal with assholes like Destry, that was a sacrifice too. I hadn't seen much sacrifice from her, and now she was planning to go to Cabo without me. It was so wrong that for the first time I began to doubt her loyalty to me. Along with that, I began to question my loyalty to her. Okay, looks like you've already made up your mind, I said. You mean I can go? She asked. It was like communicating with a child. Tracy, you're an adult. You can make your own decisions. I have to say I'm surprised and disappointed, I said. I know, she said. I'm disappointed too. She didn't understand my disappointment at all. She thought I was disappointed that I couldn't go. Of course, I meant disappointed in her decision to do it without me. As we walked to my car, she hugged my arm, satisfied that she'd gotten her way. I wasn't happy at all. She chatted all the way home. I had nothing to say. Once home, she tried to initiate sex. Not today, Tracy, I said. It's been a long week. In all the years we'd been together, I'm not sure I'd ever turned her down for sex. She just looked at me in surprise. You don't want me? She asked, completely discouraged. I told her not today. She still hadn't realized that I was disappointed in her because of that trip to Cabo. In the weeks leading up to the trip, there were times when our communication was pretty good. But I was working so many hours, and most of the time I didn't have the energy to pretend that everything was okay. The day she left, I told her to have a good time and that she and I would have some things to discuss after she returned. What kind of discussion? She asked. She had a slightly concerned look on her face. Have a good time and then we'll talk about it, I told her. Was it cruel to bring it down on her right as she was leaving? Did I want it to stay on her mind while she was on vacation? Did I want her to be unsure of my commitment to her? Absolutely. The week flew by quickly. I was able to work long hours and we ended up finishing the house ahead of schedule a few days before the owners were supposed to move in. I told Preston about some of the things going on in my life and he helped me make a plan for this year. I knew things would be different this year, I just didn't know how much. But I'll find out soon enough. Also, Preston told me he's gotten some positive signals from the county and may have some good news soon. When Tracy came home, I noticed something had changed. She seemed more distant, less involved in our relationship. Sometimes I caught her talking quietly on her cell phone, ostensibly on business. I called Marshall and set up a meeting for Friday after work. He asked what the purpose of the meeting was, and I said, lots of things. When Marshall, Claudia, and I gathered in the office, I told them I wanted to discuss the upcoming year and some changes that needed to be made. First of all, the schedule we had last year can't continue. Angel and I are working too many hours. I know we get paid well, but this is too much, I told them. I'm sure we can work it out, maybe even hire someone else, said Marshall, not giving the appearance that he cared much about the subject. Well, speaking of staff, I won't be working with Destry and his crowd this year. I won't be managing his projects, and Angel and I won't be fixing his blunders. Not anymore. I kind of raised my voice as I said it. Suddenly, I had Marshall's attention. Wait a minute, he said, becoming a little more serious. It may have taken Terry and his team a few months to realize how we work, but we're not going to get rid of them. They're too valuable. Fine, you can keep them, said I. Neither Angel nor I will have anything to do with them, I told them. Wait, he said. Angel is an employee of Pheasant Construction, and if he's assigned to work with them, he'll work with them. Marshall's voice was rising. Furthermore, if I assign you to work with Terry or Junior or anyone else, you will work with them. Now he was yelling at me. You're forgetting, Marshall, that I'm a partner too, I said. I have rights as an owner, and I'm exercising my rights in this matter. After saying that, I saw Marshall look at Claudia, and she quickly looked away. There was a pause in the discussion. What? I asked. They looked at each other again, and then I saw Claudia nod toward Marshall. Kevin, you're not a partner anymore, said Marshall to me. He further told me that when I took out the loan, it was secured by my stock. According to the corporate charter, I had to start paying off the loan. As I repaid the loan, I would get my shares back. I explained it to you during the loan processing, Claudia told me. I never brought up this discussion. No wonder they were so willing to extend credit. I'd been busting my ass at Pheasant Construction for the last 2 years, thinking I owned it, but I was no different than Junior or Crump, just an hourly employee. I see, I said, standing up. I was so angry that I needed to leave. I was afraid of what I might do. Kevin, we can certainly continue to discuss some of these issues, Marshall was saying as I left the office. Kevin, Iris called out to me as I was leaving, but I didn't believe myself that I could say a word to her. That night, I really wanted to discuss the future with Tracy. I hoped that she would be there for me during this difficult time and that we could plan our future. By 7 o'clock, she still wasn't home. She hadn't answered her voicemail or texts. I needed to find out. I'd planned to talk to Angel, I owed him. But I was sure my days at the Pheasant were over. All my trust in Marshall was gone. Claudia came up with a plan to get me removed as partner. Meanwhile, I was working 50, 60 hours or more each week. All of my efforts and stress were making Pheasant Construction's reputation worse and worse. Tracy finally showed up a little after 9. I was confused. I wanted to talk to her about everything, but at the same time I was annoyed that she had come so late and hadn't told me anything. When I asked her where she was, she became defensive and never gave me an intelligible answer. The mood between us was not good at that moment. I could not envision a scenario in which I could get the support I needed to discuss the future. I went to bed upset with Tracy and she didn't talk to me either. The next day I went to see Angel. He was the one I was most worried about. If I left, would he be able to continue working at Pheasant with Destry's attitude toward him? I sat down with Angel and explained that I was leaving and why. He nodded and understood. I asked him if he would be okay and he said he would be. He was a tough kid. He then asked what I was going to do. You know, Angel, I'm going to start my own carpentry business. It's going to take some time to get it up and running, but I'm sure I can succeed at it, I told him. And I can't do it right away, but if you can hold out for a few months, I'd love for us to work together again, said I. He smiled and said he wanted that too. You'll tell me when you're ready to receive me, KC, he told me. I hugged him as I left. It had gone better than I had expected. I had quite a bit of cash on hand that I was going to spend on financing my new house. So cash flow wasn't going to be a problem. I'll just wait a few more months before I start setting up my new place. Now I had to quit Pheasant Construction. I called Marshall on Sunday. I was ready to leave him a voicemail, but he surprised me by answering. Kevin, I'm so glad you called. I hadn't even spoken yet. I know we had some disagreements on Friday, but everything can be worked out. He continued in his most convincing voice. When I finally got a chance to talk to Marshall, I just said, Marshall, I'm resigning immediately. That's all I had to say. Kevin, you're not resigning. He said it in his most confident voice. You and I are going to sit down and work this out. Where are you? Let's have lunch and work it out, he continued. Marshall, I'm done. I'll never work with you again, I told him. And then he went on to talk about how we had a backlog of work that needed to be done. How could I leave our company after all these years? His outrage was unbounded. Then, just to tease, I said, Marshall, I'm sure Terry Destry and his team, for all their skill, can easily handle all the work. After all, just a few days ago you were telling me how good they are. Didn't you? I couldn't help myself. I was still so angry at this guy. There was a pause on the line as if we were digesting what I had said and my sarcasm. You son of a bitch, he hissed at me. After everything I've done for you, you'll never get a job in this town again. Hell, you can't even satisfy your woman. He said this with a sarcastic grin. I hung up. My woman? What was that? Why had he dragged Tracy into this? Did something happen in Cabo with Tracy? I needed to find out. A strange coincidence occurred when I was on my way home. As I drove past a popular cafe, I saw Belinda Fissan's car parked out front. She drives a white BMW X1 with license plates. Blenda. I pulled over. Maybe she could tell me what might have happened in Cabo. I saw Belinda sitting alone, fiddling with her iPhone. I sat down across from her. I think I startled her with my suddenness. Jesus, Kevin. What the hell are you doing here? She asked me without much friendliness or warmth. I was surprised to see that it was as pale as I was. Even after a week or so, one would expect some of the bronze to remain. Belinda, can I ask you a couple questions? She just looked at me. I took that as a yes. Did you go to Cabo this year with Marshall? Do I look like I've been to Cabo? She asked, throwing her hands up to demonstrate the pallor of her skin. I sat stunned, digesting the meaning of what was being said. I left Marshall in November. I live in one of the condos in Forest Meadow, she told me. And I think your little wifey has something to do with it, she continued. I never caught them, but she was around a lot. He said he was helping her with the business. I think he was helping her, but business had nothing to do with it, she said. So, wait a minute. You're saying you saw Tracy and Marshall together? I asked. Together! Yeah, a lot. It started sometime last year when I started noticing her hanging around somewhere. Before I left him, my spies told me they saw them together all the time at bars and restaurants. And even when I didn't hear from them, he often didn't come home until the evening. She continued. A couple of times I was told that his car was parked outside some of the houses that Pheasant was building after hours. When you drive a big white Suburban with red Pheasant logos, it's very difficult to get in unnoticed, she told me. I just sat there stunned. All those late nights, the mysterious phone calls, the time away from home, and then all those comments from everyone. I must be the only idiot who didn't realize what was going on. I got up to leave without saying a word. My thoughts were a blur. You're not still with her, are you? Um, what? She called out to me as I left. As I left, I quietly said to myself, no, no, probably not. On the way home, I struggled with my emotions. I was so sad and betrayed by my wife and former business partner employer. How could they do this to me? But during the trip, my emotions began to change. From sadness to anger. Anger partly at Tracy, but mostly at Marshall. When I thought of Tracy, one thing I liked about her was her simple, trusting innocence. One thing I kept noticing about Marshall was his persuasive, manipulative personality. Tracy never stood a chance. I know that doesn't excuse her behavior, but it goes a long way toward explaining it. When I got home, the Corolla was in the driveway. All right, let's settle this, I thought. When I walked in, Tracy was sitting there, professionally dressed, hair combed, makeup applied. She stared at me with a guilty expression on her face. Who went to Cabo? I asked, trying to remain calm. She stared at me, then looked away sharply, then lowered her eyes. Eventually, she told me it was just her and Marshall. She admitted to having sex with him at the villa in Cabo. When I asked if they had been intimate before Cabo, she said, maybe 2 or 3 times. I realized it was more like 10 or 20. I exploded and started yelling at her. She was crying and kept apologizing. I stopped bullying her and asked her why. He told me he loved me, she sobbed. Truth be told, it hurt, but not as much as I thought it would. Ever since she'd told me she was going to Cabo without me, I'd been subconsciously planning an exit strategy. Many people will ask, why did I let her go? Why didn't I drop everything and go too? Why didn't I fight for her? The answer is somewhere along the line. Deep down, I knew it wasn't going to work. In a weird way, I even sympathized with Tracy. Maybe I was forcing a lifestyle on her that she didn't want. She said she was going to Marshall's, and I left for a walk around the grounds. I told her I'd be back in half an hour and that I'd look forward to her absence. I refused to give her a goodbye hug. When I reflected on my life, I thought I had it all. A beautiful wife, a partnership in a growing business, a career I was good at and enjoyed, business partners I could work with, and finally the opportunity to become financially independent because of the land I owned. Now all I had was land, and that wasn't for sure. Like I said, I was saddened by the loss, but most of all I was angry at Marshall for ruining everything. I blamed him. For the next 4-5 weeks, I didn't get much done. I drank a lot and felt sorry for myself. I didn't exercise. I lived a sloppy lifestyle. I didn't hear from Tracy or Marshall, and I didn't want to. I didn't feel comfortable. Every once in a while, I would get a message from Iris just checking in on me, and I appreciated it. I was sitting there late one Friday night trying to work on my business plan, and then Iris called. She said she had a new concept for my house. Suddenly, I felt excited and motivated. I wanted to see her new plans. Maybe I could even get started on them, I thought. She said she works at Maxine's, but she had plans with me. I told her I would meet her at Maxine's. Kevin, can you drive? She asked. I'm fine, I told her. I've only had 1 drink. Well, maybe 2 or 3. I need to be more careful driving. About halfway to town, I took stock of the situation. I probably should have cleaned up a little before I went to Maxine's. I was in sweatpants, work boots, and a long-sleeve t-shirt. I hadn't shaved in a few days and probably needed a shower. Not the best image of a typical Maxine's customer. Maxine's has a beautiful wood-paneled bar. It's not a place for a pick-me-up, more like a celebration or romantic dinner. It's not usual to see people in jackets and ties or dresses for the ladies. It's not dark, but there is mood lighting for a martini or glass of Pinot Noir. I was a little ashamed of my scruffy appearance and apologized to Iris for it. She watched me carefully and said, "Don't worry about it. We're not too busy yet. But you could definitely use some tidying up." I asked her for the plans, and when she gave them to me, I got up to leave. "Kevin, stay a minute. I'm slow right now. Take a look and tell me what you think of the house," she said. "Let me get you a cup of coffee." "I can stay for a few minutes. How about a whiskey and soda?" I asked. She looked at me silently for a long time but brought me my drink. She had a customer at the other end of the bar and went out to help him. As I sipped my drink and considered her plans, I heard the door open and saw Iris look up anxiously. Then I heard it. It was Marshall, Destry, and 2 other cowboys. He saw me right away and the group walked over to him. What the hell were they doing at Maxine's? I saw Iris watching anxiously. Well, if it isn't good old Kevin," he said. "What's up, buddy?" he said, and looked me over from head to toe with a wide grin on his face. I didn't say a word. "A little celebration for our company," he continued. This week we signed contracts for 3 new homes in River Ridge. Business, as they say, is booming. He laughed. You seem a little out of sorts, Kevin. Are you okay? He asked with mocking sincerity. Krampus and Destry chuckled. I said to Iris, I gotta go, I'll talk to you later, ignoring Marshall and his crowd. When I got up, Marshall stood right in my space and said, I'll tell Tracy I saw you. She's home right now waiting for me. With a knowing smile, he threw that in my face. This elicited another laugh from the group. I think it was a combination of my hatred for Marshall, humiliation in front of the 3 scumbags, and disrespect for Tracy. I punched him in the face, knocking him to the ground. Junior quickly grabs me from behind, clasping my hands, and then Destry appears. He slaps me, backhanded, right to left, right to left, right to left. When Marshall gets up, he yells to his guys, Press his hands against the bar! Junior holds me, Destry grabbing one arm and Krampus the other. Junior squeezes me, and I can barely move, my hands on the bar. Sister Joan taught me a lesson in Catholic school. Swollen knuckles teach lessons. Marshall hissed at me. And with those words, he brought the bottle of beer down on my left hand. I had the strength to move it, but it still caught a lot of it, and it hurt. At that moment, Iris and a couple of waiters jumped up to us. Get out of here, she yells. For a moment, I think she's addressing me, but no, she's looking at Marshall and the others. Junior lets go of me with a shove, and they walk quickly and silently to the door. She looks at me and tells me to sit at a small table by the door to the kitchen, away from the other customers. Back at the bar, things quickly return to normal. I am completely and utterly humiliated, and my arm is in great pain. One of the waiters brings me ice. Getting an insult from Marshall, cracked knuckles, and then a slap from Destry was humiliating. On top of that, I looked at myself. I looked pathetic. Unshaven, in sloppy clothes with a bleeding arm and half drunk. Embarrassing. Iris comes up. I'll give you a ride. I start to protest and she tells me, You've been drinking. You're in pain and you're emotional. Don't even think about it. She looks at me with a long, hard stare. Shortly after, I see none other than Preston Balfour enter Maxine's. I see Iris point to the corner I'm in, and he walks over. Come on, son, he says to me, and we walk out. A silent ride home. Now I'm ashamed of Preston, too. I feel like I've really hit rock bottom. We stopped, and he said, Get cleaned up and I'll see you in the morning. It's Saturday morning, and Preston shows up around 7:30. Fortunately, I had already showered, shaved, and dressed. We have a long conversation, first about life in general, but gradually we start talking about my life, some of my mistakes, and then the future. Son, I'm going to tell you something someone once told me. He pauses and sighs deeply. You see, I used to love to play cards. To tell you the truth, I wasn't very good at it. One night I lost all my rent and food money for the month. I sat on the front steps and felt sorry for myself. Then this old man sat down on the steps next to me. I began to tell him how unlucky I was and how I was always getting bad cards. Partner, he says to me, there's one thing you have to remember about cards. We can't control the cards we get. But when they are dealt to us, it's our job to play them the best way we can. When he got up to leave, he said, That's for life too, and walked away. I never forgot that advice and never gambled again. After a while, Preston left, but I haven't forgotten his words. The situation was gradually improving. I began to take care of myself first and foremost. I finished my business plan. I vowed to give up alcohol, and I mostly kept to myself. Once or twice a week, I would get texts and calls from Iris, and I would talk to Preston. He helped me register my business, KC Custom Carpentry, as an LLC. My anger at Tracy was replaced by sadness. About what we had and what was gone. I was sad that we weren't together, and about the life path she might choose. Poor naive Tracy, seduced by that sociopath. My anger at Marshall burned bright and hot. Only I hadn't figured out how to get my revenge yet. One evening, Preston called and invited me over to his place. We gathered in his office, which I built, and I noticed an open bottle of champagne. Are we celebrating? I asked as he poured me a glass of bubbly. Yes, as a matter of fact it is, he said. My friend at the county commission said they voted to extend the zoning to R5. All of your property and most of mine will get that zoning on June 1st. We raised toasts and talked about what it all meant. It was a happy conversation. After all, I was going to be rich, or at least comfortable. We also talked about my life and the twists and turns it has taken in the last year or so. I was spouting off and Preston was just listening. Eventually, I started talking about Marshall and what a bad person he was. As I was about to leave, I hugged Preston, thanked him, and told him what a good friend he was. He just nodded his thanks. He stood on the porch as I walked to my car. From the porch, he said, "Son, you know something has to be done about him." "Who?" I asked. "You know who," he said, turned and walked into the house. 3 days later, I got an unexpected phone call. "I'm looking for a custom home in the River Ridge neighborhood. I was given your name," he said. He introduced himself as Fairchild Reese. We agreed to meet on his land the next day. We ended up looking at the site and I put together my proposal. I had a good markup, but I really wanted to do this project. I presented a proposal, we haggled, and came to an agreement. I later learned that he had originally signed with Pheasant, but declined after seeing some of their recent work. I have a strong suspicion that this recommendation came from Iris, but she won't admit it. I called Angel to discuss the possibility. We agreed to meet at the River Ridge construction site on Saturday morning. We looked at the site and familiarized ourselves with the plans. Angel asked a couple questions and gave us some ideas about the construction. Everything he said made sense. I told him that the Reeses had money, that they were special, but seemed reasonable. Finally, I asked Angel, "So, are you ready to leave Pheasant and work with me?" He looked at me, lowered his eyes, thought for a minute, and agreed. I hugged Angel, so glad to be working with him again. "Casey, I need you to look at something," says Angel to me. There seems to be some hesitation on Angel's part about the current construction of the Pheasant at River Ridge. The site spans the canyon, and the plan was to build a bridge connecting the sites on both the east and west sides of the canyon. Destry and his crew were building a bridge. Angel was in the process of finishing the house to bring it up to code. When he saw the bridge, he had some doubts. When he tried to ask Destry about it, he was told to shut up and mind his own business. I asked if Marshall or Destry would be at the construction site today. Angel told me, "No way." I guess you can never confuse this group for workaholics. We went to the job site. It wasn't that far from the Reese's lot, maybe 3/4 of a mile. As Angel said, there was no one there. We walked up to the bridge. There was a small shelf about 4 feet from the edge of the canyon. The full depth of the canyon was 40 or 50 feet. Angel led me over to a shelf so we could look at the bridge structure from the underside. "KS, look." He pointed to the joints. "Screws only, no metal plates. They'll break and that bridge will kill someone," Angel told me with deep concern. He was right. That bridge wouldn't pass any inspection. The entire structure was compromised. The county was so far behind in building inspections that it would be months before anyone saw it. When I looked at the structure, it looked like typical Destry work. Low quality, just enough to get by. Enough to survive the first warranty year. Certainly not designed for the long term. "Angel, forget it, let's go," said I. "Casey?" he asked, looking at me with concern. I told him we had to leave. I also told him to quit Pheasant immediately and never come back to that construction site again. I started thinking about a few things. 2 days later, I got a call. The caller ID said Tracy. I almost didn't answer. "Hey, how's it going?" I asked. In a quiet voice, I heard, "Kevin, I think I'm in trouble." "Can you meet me?" she said. "Where's Marshall?" Unable to resist, I asked her. Then she started sobbing. "Kevin, please!" she gasped. I met her in town, and she told me she was scared. Scared of what she had gotten herself into. When I asked her to explain, she said it was a long story and she didn't want to stay in town. Someone might see her. I told her to follow me to my house, our old place. On the way, I made a phone call. When we arrived, I told her to pull the car behind the old store out of sight. We entered the house and I asked Tracy to tell me what was going on. She was visibly upset and trembling. She told me the following. Marshall was charming at first. Took her out to dinner, bought her clothes, treating her well. I hated to hear it, but at the same time I was perversely curious, wanting to know the whole story. Seems like things started to change after her last trip to Cabo. She was no longer respected. He didn't ask her out as often. He was just waiting for satisfaction for himself. According to her, she didn't understand what was going on. Marshall told her he loved her. And last night, Marshall took her out to a nice dinner, turned on the charm, and asked her if she loved him. She said she did. He told her that he was having problems at work and needed her help. She told him she was willing to help in any way she could. He told her that Destry and his boys were going back to Texas and he needed them to stay. He had a lot of things piling up. She just looked at him, wondering how she could help. He told her that if she was friendly with them, they would stay at the Pheasant. At first, she didn't understand what he was asking, but eventually it came to her. She had to entertain Destry, Crump, and Junior to get them to stay. When she told me about it, she looked at me, silent tears running down her cheeks. I asked her where Marshall thought she was, and she told me that she had told him that her mother was sick and that she would spend a few days with her. Upon her return, she was to serve Destry and his boys. She didn't know what to do. I wanted to make things clear to her. We're not getting back together, I told her. Too much had happened. But I would help her. I just wasn't sure how at the time. We ended up talking for a long time. She was crying and wishing she'd never been there for Marshall. I told her I agreed, but you can't change what's already happened. We talked about happier times and laughed about some things. It was comfortable and friendly. It was probably one of the most open and honest conversations we have ever had. We paused for a moment and I wondered if I should ask the next question, but curiosity took over and I asked her. Tracy told me about the game of hide and seek. What was it? I asked with a smile. It seemed like a safe and easy topic to me. She looked down. She was silent for probably 2 whole minutes. I figured she just wasn't going to answer. Finally, in a whisper, in a voice an octave or 2 higher, childlike, she told me the story. My dad lived with us. He wasn't home a lot. He drove a truck. I wondered what this had to do with my question. I didn't say anything, just listened. When he was at home, he used to get angry a lot. My mom told me not to make him angry. When he played with me, I was so happy. She continued to speak in a little girl's voice. We lived in an old farmhouse on the outskirts of Prairie View. I think I was about 4 years old. It was a big house. He liked to play hide and seek with me. One day I begged him to play with me. He was in a bad mood, but finally said he would play. I hid, and he never came looking for me. I never saw him again. He left us and my mom blamed me. And that's all she said. After a moment I asked, I needed to know, why were you naked when we played? She sat like that for a minute or two, and I could see that she was thinking intensely. Finally, she looked me straight in the eye and said, because he liked me so much. Oh my God. I just sat there speechless, staring at her. That poor, sweet, spoiled little girl. It explained so many things. I wanted to hug her and protect her and tell her everything was going to be okay. But I couldn't. It wouldn't be fair to anyone. At that moment, I saw the reflection of the headlights flicker into the store. Iris was here. On the way home, I called Iris. I needed her help. When Iris came in, Tracy was alarmed. What's she doing here? She asked. Tracy, I said calmly and soothingly. Iris will help. But she's Marshall's niece, she faltered. Tracy, don't worry, Iris said. I hate my uncle. I won't work with him or Mom anymore. I'm here to help you, Iris explained. I needed Iris to stay with Tracy while I did a few other things. I didn't want Tracy to be alone. After listening to her story, I realized that we needed to get Tracy out of Central Oregon and that she needed professional help. I had a friend in the valley, a mental health professional who I would call tomorrow. I had a plan. It was risky. I couldn't let anyone find out about my plans. Well, maybe just one person. Iris put Tracy to bed in the master bedroom and we talked. I explained the whole story to Iris. By the time I was done, she was furious with her uncle. I told her what I needed from her and she agreed. If all went well, Iris would take Tracy to the valley in a day or 2. I asked Tracy about her cell phone. She looked for it but said she must have lost it. She did that from time to time, so I wasn't surprised. I searched her car and found it under the driver's seat. I was going to need it. The next morning, while everyone was still up, I had coffee with Preston. I had unwittingly started this conversation with Preston. There are times in life when you have to trust people. This was one of those moments for me. I told him I'd see him tomorrow night. That morning, I called my friend in the valley. I explained what Tracy had been through and asked for his help. He gave me a name. After 3 or 4 more referrals, many hours on the phone, mostly on hold, we found a residential treatment facility for Tracy. It cost some money, but there was no question that it had to be done. And I was paying. We agreed that Iris would take her to the valley the next morning. Iris said she had college friends there and planned to stay with them for a few days. That's good. Taking Tracy's cell phone, I set the trap. An hour later, I got the answer I was hoping for. Mid-afternoon, I loaded up my truck and drove to Preston's, leaving my bright red truck with the fresh KC Custom Carpentry logo right in front of Preston's house. We talked for a while, and then he handed me the keys to his old gray battered Tacoma ranch truck, a vehicle as conspicuous as a tumbleweed in the desert. I grabbed my duffel bag and shoved it into the Tacoma. With nervous anger, I pulled out of my seat. When I finished my 3/4-mile hike to the base of the bridge, dusk was already descending. I didn't see a soul. I was dressed in all black. I kept checking for cameras, but everything was still too undeveloped. I was safe. I crept up to the ledge under the bridge that Destry had built by the new house on Canyon. Cautiously, I climbed up onto the frame, always keeping to the near side of the frame. The far side was a problem, and it would only get worse from here. My saw cut through the screws and some of the supports shifted a bit. There were some nervous moments, but everything held, just barely. Now the framing on the far side of the bridge was just resting against the 4x6 girders. In high winds, the bridge could have collapsed. I then attached a rope to the near end of the 4x6 girder. I crawled back to the safety of the ledge and looked at my watch. 18:15. I pulled out Tracy's phone and checked the messages. One was from Marshall. "On my way, baby, can't wait to see you naked." And then I looked at the previous post. Then at 6:30 at the Canyon House coup. And then the one I'd sent earlier. I studied the way she corresponded with him to mimic the way she wrote to him. "Marsh, honey, Mom is driving me crazy and I miss you. I was hoping we could play a game at the Canyon House. We can meet there Friday night. I can probably be there between 6:30 and 7 o'clock. Then I deleted the history of the text. It was getting cooler and it was pitch black. There were no lights around, but my eyes were getting used to the darkness, adjusting. A few sounds, but pretty quiet. I grabbed a few rocks just in case. I also grabbed a piece of pressure-treated 2x4 lumber. I was ready to go. Now I was waiting. It didn't take long. I heard a Suburban pull up. There was some old rock song from the 90s playing on the radio in his car. I always hated that kind of music. And then there was silence as he turned off the car. He whistled as he walked across the bridge. There was a slight shift in the section I was working on as he crossed that part, but it held. I saw one light come on in the house as he entered. I thought about this house, but it still wasn't finished. Destry really was a shitty builder. I tied the rope around a small, thick tree on the far side of my ledge. This would give me leverage when I pulled it. Tracy called me, "You're still coming." It was 6:55. I didn't answer. 7:10. "Where the hell are you?" Marshall Pheasant doesn't like to be kept waiting. A few minutes later, the lights go out in the house and I hear the door slam. Showtime. This time he crosses the bridge without whistling. Halfway across to back up, I threw a handful of pebbles on the far side of the bridge. I see him pause and turn at the noise. This distracts his attention, and I manage to remove the slack in the rope so that he doesn't notice the movement. I timed it perfectly. I confidently and firmly pulled the rope, and the 4x6 bridge collapsed into the canyon. Now the long end of the bridge is not supported by anything, and it too is starting to collapse and fall. When the long end of the bridge collapses into the canyon, Marshall amazingly leaps across the void and grabs onto the secure short end of the bridge. He hangs on. "Help! Help!" he yells. Then he tries to get up. Marshall was once a strong man, but now he's heavier and not as strong as he used to be. There is no way he can bring himself to get up. I decide to speed up the process. "Hey, Marshall," I said. "Who is this?" "Kevin? Kevin, you have to help." "The bridge has fallen. Help me up," he shouts. "Marshall, do you remember what you said to me last time?" I ask. "Kevin, for God's sake, I'm starting to crawl," he pleads. Adrenaline raged through me, but I felt absolutely no remorse. With my iPhone flashlight, I inspected the ledge to make sure there was no sign of my presence there. I threw a 2x4 down into the canyon. Despite the cool evening, I was covered in sweat. An hour later, I was back at Preston's. I didn't even go inside, but threw my gear in my truck and drove away. The next few days passed without much incident. I talked to Iris, and now Tracy was in a treatment facility called Willows. She would be there for at least 60 days. I was paying, and it wasn't cheap. Preston and I met on Saturday morning and walked around his property for a bit. We talked about life and then moved on to the county court decision and plans for when all of this happens. Finally, back at his house, he told me how on Friday night he and I ordered 2 large pizzas with delivery from Smokey Dean's in town. He gave the driver a $40 tip, just to make sure he remembered us. As the driver was leaving, Preston asked him if they had hit the fender of the red truck out front. Courier and Preston examined it and realized there was no dent. Preston apologized for his accusations. He must remember seeing my truck. As I turned to leave, Preston asked, "So?" I looked him in the eye, nodded quickly, then turned and walked away. We never talked about it again. Monday morning, Angel and I are working at the Reese's construction site on River Ridge. Mid-morning, we hear sirens and a flurry of activity near our construction site. I guess what's going on, but I ignore it. In the evening, it's all over the news. An influential local builder dies in a construction accident. And on it goes. A terrible fall, unknown circumstances, a tragic death. Iris calls, and although she has grown to despise her uncle, he is still her uncle. She says she's going back to Central Oregon. There are a few more calls from mutual acquaintances, and I make appropriate remarks, but for the most part, I ignore all the noise. After all, Angel and I have a house to build. About a week later, in the middle of the day, a new black sedan pulls up to our construction site. 2 men got out of it. One was from CCB, the Builders Council, and the other was from the District Attorney's Office. They wanted to talk to Angel. Even though they didn't want me there, I didn't leave Angel's side. They were investigating the construction site where Marshall died. They were asking specifically about the bridge. Angel told them he had nothing to do with this construction. He said he even voiced his concerns to Terry Destry, but was told to mind his own business. I guess they didn't believe Angel. I went to get something from my truck. It was a copy of a magazine with a picture of the house Angel and I had built a few years ago, hinging it over a dried-up creek bed. I showed them the article. It was an example of the quality of work Angel had done on a project like this. I explained it to them. The ADA remembered the article. They then asked about Destry, Crump, and Jr. Angel gave them his honest opinion and, frankly, took them calmly. When I had a spare moment, I made my points about their poor quality. I was less diplomatic. They went on to say that it could end with the 3 being banned from building in Oregon, and there is a possibility that manslaughter charges will be filed. They thanked us and left. Angel and I continued to work successfully on Reese's house. It's late Friday night, I'm working on a saw, and a gray pickup truck with a club cab pulls up to the job site. The 3 doors open and Terry Destry, Ed Crump, and Junior Messersmith step out. Destry walks in front. "You got a big mouth, Cotton," Destry says as he approaches me, and the other 2 step on his heels. He looms over me. A quick glance shows that Angel is inside watching what's going on. I was just telling the truth. Sometimes the truth can hurt, I tell him. I know it's not smart to piss him off, but I hate that bastard. Well, we've been banned from building in this goddamn state, so we're going back to Texas, he tells me. Before we go, the boys and I have a little unfinished business with you. I believe you owe me. I never was able to entertain your wife. He said this, and Krampus laughed. I noticed Angel rounding the corner at the back of the house. The 3 approached. I'd been in this spot before at Maxine's. Just then I saw Angel throw a 25-foot Stanley Fat Max measuring tape at Junior. It clinked against the hairless back of his head. Junior spins in place, stunned and enraged. Angel, nimble and quick, shortens the distance and strikes Junior's balls with his steel boot. His eyes bulge, his mouth folds into a wordless O, and he falls like a giant redwood tree. A modern-day David and Goliath situation. Angel turns to Crump, and the latter, cackling, runs off, Angel after him. As I watch Angel pounce on Crump, Destry throws the first punch. A brutal overhand right that would have knocked me down if I hadn't reflexively tucked my chin. But it still hurts. I'm stunned, and he tries a combo, left to right. I cover up, but the bastard is fast. A few punches miss. He keeps coming, and I retreat. He thinks because I don't hit back, he's got the advantage. If anyone remembers the Foreman and Alley fight, Rumble in the Jungle, Alley had his own strategy. Let big old George Foreman throw a lot of punches and wear himself out. Ali entered the fight in the last few rounds and defeated an exhausted Foreman. I certainly wasn't comparing myself to Ali, but I started to notice Destry getting tired. Smoking is not good for the lungs. As he continued to throw punches, his arms seemed to droop. So far, I haven't thrown a single punch. Suddenly, sensing his fatigue, I delivered a straight right punch that hit him in the left eye. It stunned him. He raised his arms and I hit him right in the belly. Then 2 more punches to the head. He tried to grab me in a clinch. I stepped back and kicked him in the balls. Not as good a punch as Angel's in Junior. But that's all it took. He went down in a fetal position. I called the police, but before they got there, Destry had crawled to the truck and made off with Junior. I never saw Crump or the other 2 assholes again. As we left the construction site, I thanked Angel for saving me from Junior, looked at him and asked, "How would you feel about becoming a partner in the construction business?" He laughed and shook my hand. Epilogue. Pheasant's construction collapsed after everything that happened. Claudia asked me if I wanted to buy it. I told her I didn't want anything to do with that business. No, thank you. We have changed the name of our business to K and a Custom Carpentry. Things are going well. We have taken on several jobs that were previously Pheasant projects. Tracy's gotten a lot better. She lives in the valley, has a boyfriend. I met him a couple times. His name is Claude Barron. His name is Bear. Big, bearded, quiet guy. He's devoted to Tracy. I know people ask why I'm not angry at Tracy for her betrayal. Having dealt with the trauma of her childhood, I feel sorry for her and protective of her more than anything else. She seems almost like a little sister to me now. County zoning has passed, and aside from the construction business, a lot of my time is spent on that. Preston has become my best friend. And then there's Iris. We're close. We share a lot of the same interests. She does most of the design work for Angel and me. She designs for others and sometimes works hourly on our jobs. It's a bit of an odd relationship because of our history and my history with her family, but we are growing closer. We're taking it slow, but I can't imagine my life without her. And I really want to see her naked. With that comment, I get a pretty big tap on the shoulder. Oh, I forgot you were here while I was telling this story, I say, and she laughs. Thanks for watching. I hope you enjoyed it, so subscribe to my channel and watch the next video.